Good evening. This budget workshop and program review of the Judson Board of Trustees is hereby called to order at 5 p.m. I'm very pleased you've taken time to join us this evening. In compliance with the State Government Code on open meetings, tonight's agenda has been appropriately posted. These proceedings are being video and audio recorded and will become part of Judson's permanent legal record. In order that the tape adequately reflects these proceedings, please silence your mobile devices and refrain from talking while others are speaking. Once again, I extend to each of you a sincere welcome from the entire school board. Thank you for your interest in Judson ISD. We've established a quorum, and if you will please mark your attendance. So you see all 7 members are here, and Dr. Fields to my left. Good evening to you.
Good evening.
The next item on our agenda is citizens to be heard. Did we have anyone sign up, Ms. Holmes? No, we did not. All right, moving on then. Discussion items, reports, discuss and review updated information on proposed 2025-2026 fiscal year budget. Dr. Fields.
Yes, ma'am. We would like to first go over the budget workshop information, just giving some more background on where we currently are in our recent budget and our timeline of how the budget process should go. And then we'll go into a few selected areas for program review. I would ask at any time as we're going through this PowerPoint presentation for the budget workshop, if you have a question, please just stop us and let's answer the question as you have it. So if we could go ahead and start, Ms. Davis, Mr. Guetta.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Fields. Good evening, Ms. Canori and the rest of our board. As you know, this is the workshop number 2, and as a thing we wanted to do this year, we wanted to be a little more transparent with you. So we have, I think, 6 total workshops, including the budget adoption at the end of June. So we'll just kind of go through as it's a little bit different for us since it's a little early on for workshops. So we'll just kind of tell you the timeline and where we're going, what we're looking at. We're doing our fall and midterm team submissions right now. So once we start getting those numbers back, then we start forming our budgets and our revenues for the next year. So this evening, like I said, we'll talk the timeline. We'll talk about enrollment trends. We'll give you an update on where we are with our general fund, child nutrition fund, and our debt service funds. We'll talk about the budget challenges and then any kind of future considerations. And we do want to talk a little bit tonight about the VATRE that we might propose to the board and to the public coming up. So again, this is budget workshop number 2, January 16th. The next one will be February 11th. Followed by April 3rd. Then we have one in May, June 5th, and then the adoption June 26th.
It was the one on the 4th, Mrs. Salinas. So we had one on the 4th of February as well as the 11th, and we canceled the one on the 4th, but we're still.
February 11th is on.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So you can see at the end of the third 6 weeks, the enrollment on that date was 23,448 students. The attendance percentage was 93.8, and the ADA, which is the average daily attendance, cumulative for that first 6 weeks is 21,038.
End of the third 6 weeks, about what time frame are we talking about? Like December, November?
December, yes.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
December 20th. Yes, ma'am.
So if I'm tracking the numbers right from one budget workshop to another, so our enrollment has gone down about 220 some students since our November budget workshop. I think we were at 23,661, so we've lost a couple hundred students since then. It also looks like our attendance numbers are dropping too. I show we were 94.9 last budget workshop, so now our attendance has gone down 1%. Do we predict that to continue through the rest of this school year?
I would ask Dr. Gosh to speak to the trends of the attendance percentage, and then she can also speak to the enrollment as well.
Yeah, typically in the enrollment, we see more students enroll after we return from the Martin Luther King holiday as well. We do have students that unenroll around the Christmas holidays, and we have students that move back and forth. So we typically see a dip during that part of the year, and then we see increased enrollment as we move towards the end of the school year. As far as attendance, our attendance is being steady, and it is higher than where we were at this point last year. So I am pleased with that, and I know tonight we'll be talking about some of the things that we are doing to help increase that. But our attendance it did go down slightly, which is typical when we get into flu season, we get into COVID season, we get into students being ill, and plus with the students coming in and out, we do typically see that drop during this time of the year, but I would not anticipate it going down a full percentage point.
And we're higher than we were at the
We
same
are
time.
higher than we were last year, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am?
Do you expect it to go, okay, do you expect it to swing back up?
Yes, ma'am. I would expect our overall enrollment to swing back up over the next several weeks. It is very typical to see an increased enrollment after January.
Any particular percentage from history?
I wouldn't want to I couldn't tell you a specific percentage off the top of my head. no.
But what we can say is that we're over the percentage that we were last year.
As far as
right?
attendance is concerned, we are higher. We were more like a 92% attendance rate last year. I do know that. As far as like the percentage of enrollment that changes in January, I couldn't give you a number that I would feel comfortable with just right here. I can certainly look that up and provide something
Yeah.
to you in a Friday.
I'd be
memo to
curious
see
if-
what it looks like year to year.
We might recapture that 200, if we've seen swings like that before.
I can say, though, that we speak a lot about enrollment, and I would ask you guys to get into this in your presentation. We're funded based on 88.
Yeah.
So we can have 50,000 students, but if ADA-wise, we come in at a certain point, that's how we're funded throughout the year.
But we budget, that's for revenue, but all of our expenses are based off enrollment because we hire a teacher whether the student is there or not. So
Defer to
all the
Mr. Guerra and Ms.
expenses-
Davis. What would you say to that?
That's correct. It's a fine line when we start working with human resources and curriculum to see how many kids we think we're going to have. Like I said, we're funded per child per day, so we have to guess how many kids we're going to have and how often they're going to show up to school. And their job is to figure out, what classes are going to be and we'll replace them. So, like I said, this number 23,448 is one day. As you know, today 10 kids could have unenrolled. Tomorrow 12 can enroll. So it's just a one point in time. The ADA is the average of the entire year so far. So the 93.8, it can fluctuate again when kids show up or don't show up to school, whether they enroll or unenroll. The ADA is the number that we really try to focus on. The 21,038 is actually to the exact number that Mo Casey gave us when we funded this year.
So that's what we
So
budgeted.
That's exactly what we budgeted, and that's exactly where we are at this point. So, like I said, as the enrollment goes up and down per day, like I said, with 32 campuses in all reality, we can lose or gain kids at any one of the campuses during the day and during the week. So the ADA is the average number that we keep. So even though those numbers look like they fluctuate more, as long as the ADA is at that number, that's what we budgeted on this year.
I guess I'm still confused because we have revenue and expenses. Those are two completely different things, right?
Correct.
You're talking about revenue, right?
Right.
Average daily attendance, we get whatever, that
Right.
number, weighted, all that stuff. But when we are budgeting our expenses and budgeting our staffing and budgeting all of our schools, we're not budgeting and authorizing FTEs based on ADA. We're not
No.
off of how many kids we
No.
think might show up. We're doing it off what we project the
Off of-
enrollment in each
Correct.
school, right?
That's correct. And like I was saying, the enrollment goes up and down all the time. So
Correct. We take a
if it
ballpark.
dips, 200 kids like it does, like we were talking toward the end of the first semester, like I said, that teacher had 22 kids. Now the teacher has 18 or 17 kids. Well, we still have to pay that teacher the full salary.
Correct.
Still got to pay, the principal and the custodian and the cafeteria workers, bus drivers, all that stuff remains constant, even though the enrollment has gone down. So
Okay.
yes, we have to budget to make sure there's enough teachers, whether the enrollment goes up or down during the
Yeah,
year.
based on what we, best projection of enrollment. that we can get.
Absolutely.
But even if
Okay.
those enrollments dipped, they would have to be concentrated in a particular area. And I'm looking at my human resources department as well as the finance department. It would have to be concentrated in a particular area for us to make a difference in staffing, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, especially at the elementary, because you can't just, oh, we have an extra kid, we'll just stick that fourth grader in second grade, right?
Exactly.
There's an opening, there's an empty seat in second grade, we get that.
Yes, ma'am.
Obviously, way easier at secondary because you have multiple classes throughout a day, and they're teaching 6 class periods, so, but elementary is where we'll see a lot more of a gap because kids don't divide into equal numbers of 21.
Correct.
I'd say the same in secondary, but you have an excellent point, Ms. Ryan.
And I'll tell you, based on a lot of these budget discussions that we've had in the past. Administration, the board, we've always looked more at what's the worst case for expenses, and we kind of lowball the revenue, just so that we can balance things, which is not unusual. It's just getting more difficult because things are tougher. So we're trying really to get a baseline of revenue and expenses to the exact, but typically it's always been the other way. You've kind of over budgeted on the expense and you've under budgeted on the revenue to ensure we're sustainable. So again, I applaud that effort. But my question is this: since we are in a unique time, we've talked about the vouchers, I've been thinking through about our contingency budget plans. We're going through this process with an expected ADA and enrollment for next year. But I feel at this point, based on the unusual circumstance we find ourselves here in the state of Texas, that we may need to have a backup plan that's thoroughly evaluated as a contingency. And what I mean by that is, we don't know if we're going to lose 10% of our students to vouchers, 15, 20%. So there would have to be a strategy, because we can't give contracts to teachers if we see a 20% reduction in enrollment. That would put us in a situation where we're going to have to let teachers go after they've signed contracts. So I'm looking to potentially have a secondary strategy by April or May that would be sort of where things are, because we don't even know how much funding we're going to get from Austin. There's still so many variables in all of this. But I like the fact that we're going through this process earlier, but those variables are big. And I, again, just want to put it out there, we may need to have sort of a secondary course that we've talked through, so we don't have to go back and start all over again based on those enrollment numbers and have this condensed budget meeting in June because everything's changed. And I don't know if it's inappropriate, but I would even consider you thinking, administration, about surveying parents that are on the fence of taking vouchers, just so that we have some idea of what this is going to look like. But the realities are it's going to happen, and we should probably start planning for it. And there's no easy answer. I've asked a lot of my colleagues in other districts. They don't know how to tackle this problem. So we're going to have to be a little different in our approach. This is the year we do that.
I would say, Mr. Macias, that our plan, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Guerra, is to work off of what the current policies are
Yes,
when
sir.
we go through the
Yes.
budgeting process. In addition, we typically base our enrollment off of our demographers' projections, but also off of registration that we have come in during that time. And now I'm looking at the academic department, because registration should be in by that time, because we'll be working on master schedules. So that's what we'll kind of be plotting and planning with. To your point, we don't know what the legislature may come back and ask us to do. A similar point would be the 40,000, 100,000, you know what I mean? Weren't we?
The homestead exemption?
The homestead exemption. We went in and we budgeted for 40. Now, they came back with an exemption of 100,000 with an intent to replace dollar to dollar. But that hardly ever works out evenly. But we have to go in based on what the rules are at the time that we're going through the budget process. It would really be hard for us to anticipate. Now, at the end, by June 12th, I believe it is, we should have whatever the legislature is going to do at that point, correct?
I would imagine.
I'm sorry.
June 2nd. The session closes June 2nd.
Yeah, I would imagine there would be no special sessions. We would all know, maybe by April or May. It's
Yes.
still really at the end. But all I'm saying is, it should be a thought process today, and not one that we're scrambling on in June to figure out what we're going to do.
We will definitely have a plan and a process in which we use, that we bring back to the board on this budgeting process. Yes, ma'am?
I think it might, I'm sorry, go ahead. I think it might be difficult to know how many parents are considering vouchers when there's been no voucher bill put forward, with no information for them about how much it would be, and then what are the private schools that might be taking students with vouchers, what are they going to do? That's going to be really hard to nail down. I think as the voucher bills work their way through the legislature, we'll start getting some ideas, and then maybe there'll be some talk about what might happen. It's just, there's a lot of what ifs.
Yes, ma'am.
I appreciate your input, Mr. Macias, because I had a question here. How do we adjust for the decreasing trend? And then vouchers is an additional layer on that. So I like the idea of having, or thinking into a Plan B, something that worst case, maybe, and we don't know what the vouchers is going to look like, but we can certainly try to worst case it and start projecting a little bit. What would we do if, and have a backup plan? I really like that idea.
I would say that we will have a presentation that we bring to the board. I don't believe that we will bring a Plan B. I can tell you that whenever we do a budget process, we give you what we anticipate as the worst-case scenario. To your point, we go low on enrollment, we go low on ADA, we budget it low, and we use the demographer's projections for enrollment, but we really, and you'll see in the next slide where we've already anticipated a trend to go down in the enrollment for next year. Again, we don't know what the impact of vouchers are going to be. They could come back and say, yes, you can use the vouchers, but what were we talking about earlier in terms of vouchers? There were stipulations before on how those were going to be used. It wasn't a straight, your child goes to a private school, so you can take all of the money and go. What was some of the stipulations that they had with?
Yes, sir. There was such a push toward the end to try to get these vouchers pushed through that they were changing the, the child has to be in public school. They can't already be enrolled in a private school. They can't be at an A campus. They have to be at a deficient campus, a C or D campus. So there was just so many changes that obviously nothing happened, but you can see what can happen, which is why Dr. Fields is saying we have to budget and plan on the current law, because even the last legislative session, there was a ton of talk about raising the basic allotment, and it went from $1,200 down to like $90. So now that we're here, we always plan for everything, and we do have contingency plans. And even when we set the budget, when it starts, it doesn't mean we're going to spend that entire budget. So if all of a sudden we see enrollment decline, obviously we pull back on the expenses, because we can't, those expenses won't be there anyways, because the kids aren't there. So there's expenditures that we do. Like I said, we try to plan as best we can based on historical data. But once we go, obviously if there's a huge increase in students or in ADA, then obviously they'll be more expensive. If there's less, then like I said, then we tail back what we expend.
But to Ms. Ryan's point, if we find that there's going to be decreased numbers, then we go to the Human Resources Department and we say, hey, through attrition, we're not going to replace particular positions because we don't need them. But there's always things that we do throughout this process to try and make up for whatever the conditions are as we work through.
Our safest recourse would probably be to consider what TEA asked us to do when they were already considering the 100,000 homestead exemption, is that we still had to adopt everything under the current law of 40,000, but consider the decisions of the board and the decisions within the budget process that things were going to change. So similarly, because we do not know what the outcome could possibly be, our considerations and our decisions as we are going through the budget process need to keep in mind that we could possibly have reduced enrollment. And as we revamp our enrollment process, we could consider some questions as far as, are you planning on coming back through our enrollment process, through processes that our parents are already familiar with. But the best recourse would be that we take all of those things into consideration as we're making decisions through the budget process. That would be our recommendation.
And I would add, all that is great. The only reason, again, is just to set contingency, the stage for being prepared. And one of the first thoughts, just to give you a firm example of what I'm thinking about, is that all DOI teachers would not get a contract in March or April, if we're going to be offering it, because that's our contingency. That amount of 100 teachers that are DOIs, we'll hold off on that until we know more about our enrollment. That would be a plan. But it just, again, let's talk about it as a board and as administration and see if that makes sense. Because I also know how valuable DOI our teachers are, and we need them. And if our enrollment doesn't dip, are they going to go
They
somewhere
will,
else?
if we start
but-
not offering the contract.
But
They-
that's sort of what I'm talking about, contingencies. There has to be some method that we're ready for a 10 to 20% reduction in enrollment, and we're not scrambling, because then we're going to have to let these teachers go, because we won't have students in the classroom. And that's more detrimental to an employee trying to find a job if we're cutting them at the last minute.
Yes.
So anyway, just trying to think of the human element on that, but also a strategy through this budget process that makes sense for us to be prepared either way.
Understood.
Thank you.
Okay. And I know we do, like I said, I'm still new
Ms.
here.
Ryan had a question.
No, let
Oh.
Mr. Bureau, if you want.
I was going to say, I know it'll sound really generic to the smart people, but I know we do the same in my prior district. We have a leveling process where instead of getting rid of teachers or moving teachers, we have I know it's a difficult thing to do anyway, but we level them where we move them around just to make sure we have enough teachers in the right areas for the kids. So I know it's a difficult thing for teachers, and we have to move them from a campus to a campus, but that's something that I've seen in place here as well.
We do the same here.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yes.
I know it's more difficult than I'm making it
Exactly.
sound.
Preach it to the
I know
choir.
that's what we do here, and that's.
No, I think I've talked about that. I mean, our turnover rate is still, we're losing 400 or 500 teachers are going to move somewhere else next year. That's just, every
Tricia.
district is like that, right?
Yes,
Type thing. So it's like, I don't think we're ever going to find ourselves in a position where we're like, oh, let's cut 500 teachers. So I think natural attrition is going to, anything that might have to happen, I'm not worried about that. So the two notes I wrote down is, a little bit to Laura's point, which is there's, or we call it in the military, most likely and most dangerous, right? Most dangerous is, oh my gosh, you have the lowest enrollment, low ADA, and all sorts of things change. And then you have your most likely, right? Educated people saying, this is probably what's going to happen. We're going to fill this many teacher vacancies. And so if you go look at any ISD's budget, what they brief to their board is the most dangerous, which is what they have to adopt, right?
Absolutely.
But then they also brief their most likely. They're like, this is if we fill every position and everything bad happens, right? This is our budget you have to adopt. But then they also tell their board, this is what we think is going to happen. These are what we think our expenses are going to be. And that's a great technique because the board is kind of adopting that they're buying off on the most likely, but they're also know that they are accepting a level of risk for the most dangerous, and they can see that all laid out really nicely. So I thought that was, when I was watching old budget workshops when I first, got on the board, that was something I saw great that another school district had done. My second question was on the homestead exemption, because I've heard this out of people's mouths a couple of times, so I went back and I checked and I called a couple of other friends at districts. According to the summary of finance, we didn't lose a penny on Tier 1 or Tier 2 M&O for when they switched from 100 to 40. So how much are we saying we lost? Because the summary of finance shows they made up for it. Like, we were minimum yield anyway on our pennies on Tier 2, and so that entire dollar amount was made up. And then on the Tier 1. So I just don't want anybody to think because there's a bunch of bills out there to even change the homestead exemption even more. So I don't want people to think we're losing money. Every dime we lost in property tax revenue, the state 100% gave back to us in our Tier 1 and our Tier 2 M&O.
Mr. Guerra?
Well, yes, at face value, we are technically supposed to get 100% of it back.
100%,
I
right.
agree. Yes, ma'am.
Is that
Okay.
ongoing? It's not just a one-time, every year?
Yeah, oh, yes, it's permanent. It's
Yeah,
permanent.
every year. So every dollar we don't take in property tax, the state literally gave us $1. So, and on the Tier 2, our property, what we brought in was so low that we were going to get, they have what they call maximum yield or minimum yield, right? So everybody's guaranteed to get a certain dollar amount. So we bring in so little because we just don't have a big property tax base compared to some, so that we got 100% of that money also. So I just want to make sure people don't think we're losing money if the legislature changes the homestead.
Sure, it's supposed to be reimbursed 100%. Is it really from our, not exactly, but it's, they'll do things
In
like.
what way is it not exactly?
Well, they'll do stuff like, well, we raised your, it could be the school safety allotment. We went from $9.28 to $10, so that money's increased there. So what you lost over here, we'll put it there. So there's little things they were doing, but they need to fix their formulas as well. So that's what all the back and forth is a lot of times with districts and legislators, how we try to get things straight up, because it is supposed to be dollar for dollar, but what we're finding out, because the formulas are so complex, like I said, school finances is incredibly complex. So it's looking like it's not exactly dollar for dollar, but they're trying to get it dollar for dollar. But I agree, it's supposed to. In a perfect world,
Okay, yeah.
you lost
If
$1,
someone
here's
has
$1.
calculated $1, are we talking $10,000, $100,000, or $10 million? Because the other districts don't think they're losing anything, so, on it when it changes.
Right.
So that's why I'm wondering why we think we're losing money if our surrounding districts don't think they've lost anything.
No,
For
I'm
sure
saying
not
we're
on
losing money.
M&O.
I'm saying
I
that
can assure you the
it's not
superintendents
exactly
I
dollar,
talk
it's not
to
that simple.
have concerns.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, if you could calculate that, whatever that amount is, and let the board know, that'd be great, because how big the impact is, because there are bills out there to move it to 200,000. There's all sorts of bills out there,
Oh,
right?
yeah, before even the 14th got here, there was well over 600 bills related to school finance already
Correct.
drafted, so.
Yeah, so if there's going to be a potential impact that we lost tens of millions of dollars or something from the homestead exemption, which I don't think we did, but that is something we should know.
We're not trying to give the impression that we lost tens of millions of dollars from the homestead exemption. The homestead exemption to us is not the factor. If you were to ask me, I think that we should fund based on enrollment, not ADA. Because basically what they're saying is if the student doesn't show up, then you don't get compensated for that.
Oh,
But the
and they
people
passed-
we've hired
Yeah.
are still here.
I don't think there's
And we
anybody who
still have to
disagrees
pay-
with
but
it,
what I'm
except
saying
for the
is-
few people who keep voting, because that bill comes out every single year, and it just, I don't know why it can't get enough votes. It's probably the most irrational bill that doesn't pass.
Go ahead.
Gotcha. So, you want to go through the enrollment ADA, Trish?
Yes, sir. Okay, so we put the last ADA and the attendance trends over the last several years, and you can see this current year, the 21,038, we put the enrollment as of the end of the third 6 weeks was 23,448. And it looks like it's a dip, but in all reality, it looks like we're holding pretty steady. Conservatively, again, like Dr. Fields was saying, we do peel back a little bit just to make sure. And right now, the projection for next year, for 25-26, will be 20,052 for our basic ADA.
Okay, of course I have questions on this. So on the enrollment side, that number is not what the demographer briefed in November. So do we have that's like 600 students lower than what the demographer was, or it's down 600. He was only predicting a potential loss of 200 students next year. So I'm trying to figure out do we have something new from the demographer other than what was
No,
briefed in
again,
November?
understand, when we pull these, is direct from our PEMS reports. So this is
Oh,
exactly
no, I'm
what we
talking
had
enrollment.
for the
She's
prior
talking
years.
about
I'm
the,
talking.
That's what I'm talking about as well,
enrollment.
enrollment. So when we predict enrollment, like I said, enrollment changes 100 times a day sometimes. So it could be 200 less tomorrow, or it could be 400 more tomorrow. And like I said, we just picked the enrollment on that particular day. The ADA is, like I said, the average of all those enrollment days for the entire year.
I think what she's
How
talking
did we
about,
get to the
Larry-
number 22.9? Yes.
What she's talking about, Larry, is the projected enrollment of 22.9 is at Mo Casey.
That's Mo Casey basing what he thinks that we might start the year with, yes.
Okay, not the demographer, because we just said we do enrollment off demographer.
We used Mo Casey for ours, just for this projection. We'll get with the demographers as well, obviously, and make an educated decision before we do the final budget.
Okay, because yeah, the demographer has us higher than that, so a lot of other decisions we made were based off the demographer numbers.
But to your point, in our effort to be conservative, we've now looked at Mo Casey, who are our financial people, and they said, hey, this is what we're thinking your enrollment should be when they incorporate all the different things that we were talking about. And if this is a more conservative number, it only behooves us to go lower than to think that it's going to be higher and then find ourselves in this situation where it was lower. So we're going to use the most conservative numbers that we receive, and then that's what we would present to the board in terms of our budget process.
Yeah, because the ADA line below that then, that's 1,000 less ADA. That's over $6 million. So we're not talking, a couple dollars here. That's $6 million of less revenue, essentially, is what that says, that we're going to get because of ADA next year. So that's another $6 million of stuff we're going to have to cut based on that number. So that's what I'm trying to figure out exactly where those numbers are coming from, right? Because I'm right, at 9,000 student, more than that, more than that. Because we get about 9,000 a student in Tier 1. So that if it goes down by 1,000, that's 10 million different, 9 or 10 million different in revenue, right?
I would say in Tier 1, I think our ADA is for a student is, what is it, 6,160? Now,
With the
when you bring it-
multipliers, it's
But
9,000.
multipliers are for some students, not for
Yes.
all. And then, again, we receive those multipliers and our ADA, and I'm trying to keep this as simple as possible. We receive those multipliers and our ADA when the students show up. If the students don't show up, we don't get paid for that day. So we have to be very conservative in these projections. That's why we're not jumping out here ahead of the curve saying, we're going to get all this money. We're being as conservative as possible, and that's how we're going to plan. That's why we're taking all that into consideration.
Well, yeah, I just want to make sure we're understanding the impact of this number means that's 10 million less in revenue we're going to get next year in, or more, you know, it's always a swaggy number. So like, that's going to be a lot of cuts we're going to be having to look at over the next 2 months through this budget
It's
cycle.
definitely how we're gonna plan.
If our
Yes, ma'am.
ADA goes down 1,000.
That's
That's a
exactly how we're
pretty
going to
big-
plan.
Pretty
Yes,
big
ma'am.
number.
Yes, ma'am.
So it only looks like a little dip, but that's a big dollar dip right there, so. thank you.
And that's how we're going to plan. Yes, ma'am. Keeping in mind, legislature projected, will probably come back and they'll say, hey, we're going to increase the ADA. We don't know how much. So all of this could change, but this is how we're going to go into this process. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so this is the fund balance that we've had at the end of each fiscal year over the last 7 years. And you can see back in the 2017-18 year, we were about $76 million, and it was holding steady to $78 million the next year. It took a little spike in 1920 when COVID hit, and then 2021, that's when COVID was in full swing, and we were getting a lot of federal dollars, and ESSER included 1, 2, and 3. And you can see we were able to use ESSER to hire positions to help with the learning loss, with the, to help to get kids back on track, and we were able to supplement all those teaching positions and expenditures and relief. We got a lot of relief to the general fund, so that's why we see the big spikes in the fund balance, where it got to 127 million at one point, and then the ESSER dollars go away, and it started to dip a little bit. And at the end of this last fiscal year, as you all know, in the audit report, there was 101 million dollars left in the fund balance.
It's important to note here that pre-COVID, if you were to look at the fund balance numbers, you're seeing 76 million, 78 million. And then to Larry's point, we start seeing these other funds coming in, and we're able to increase our fund balance. And now those funds aren't coming in anymore. So you're going to see a projection and move back to pre-COVID fund balance numbers. So we just wanted to be able to show that to the board, that over that 4 years when ESSER was out there, because I believe it was 3 years, and then they did an extension for a year. So now you're going to see many districts move towards pre-COVID numbers in, as far as their fund balance numbers.
So, okay, this is the general fund budget, the revised budget and the actual budget to date. And I wanted to, on the slide on the right, you can see what our projected revenues were without the disaster relief pennies and without the property value studies that we did. You can see if we hadn't taken the steps we've taken and were able to do the things we were supposed to do, with the changes and additions to the budget toward the end, we would have been close to a $40 million deficit. And on the slide on the left side, you can see where we were able to add the disaster pennies after the board approved it, and we were able to do the property value studies to get some extra revenue into the district. So currently, we show a $25 million deficit, which would put the fund balance projected at this point, at the end of this fiscal year, at $76 million. So it's kind of where we were before pre-COVID and all that, which still puts us about 3.5 months worth of operating expense in our fund balance.
Any questions about, can you go back to that? Any questions about some of the things that we did to bring down that potential $40 million deficit? Because the disaster pennies was huge and brought off about 12 million. And we'll be talking about the voter-approved tax ratification election just to keep it the same. We will, yes, ma'am. And then also the, what did they call them, the tax audit studies?
Property values.
Property value studies. We put one out, came back 2.5 million?
2.8.
2 point, well, right,
Eight.
2.8, and then, but after payment, I think it came down.
It was 270.
Yeah, about 2.6.
Okay, and then 2.6, and then another one came back at, what, 2?
2.2, yes, sir.
So those have really paid off for us as well. Now, we did a couple of budget amendments. We came to the board and asked for, what was it, 3.6?
Yes, sir.
And we anticipate getting more money back from that when they start paying out. What was that for exactly?
The payout, the one we just received that is not included in any of these slides is $2.2 million.
No, sir, I'm talking about the budget amendment for 3.6.
Oh, that was to help fund the self-funded program.
And then some of that should come back to the district.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Correct.
Yes, we asked for the 3.6 because we don't want to come back and say, okay, we have 300 more or 400 more, so we made sure we asked for enough, but it was nowhere near the 3.6, so we don't have to ask for it back. It's ours already, so it'll stay in the account, so that wasn't as much as well. So that'll reduce the deficit as well. I think it was about 1.2 million, 1.1, somewhere in that range.
Please don't hold us to that. I mean, but approximately that
Yes.
should be, and then that would bring it down to 24. So, and there's some other things that we're doing in the finance department that may even be a factor, right? In terms of the property value?
Yes, sir. Like I said, when we adopt the budget, that's just we try to do a basic forecast for the year. After it starts, as you all know, it's all true expenses and all true revenue. So we're always watching what we spend and seeing if there's any kind of revenues we can add to the district as well. So these property value studies are important for us right now. And as you know, with the legislature now in session, a lot of things could change. So we're trying to get these property value studies in as quickly as we can with our attorneys.
And we have a firm working on another property
Absolutely.
value study at this point, at this
Absolutely.
time.
Okay, so if I could clarify, we did a budget amendment for 3.6 million. We didn't need 1.2 million of that.
Correct.
So where does that go?
We're not saying that we didn't need it. We anticipate that the payouts will bring back that amount, correct?
We have to make the payments. We receive the reimbursements afterwards. So we needed that amount so that we could have enough money and enough funds to make the payments. We will expect to receive about that amount in total reimbursements before the fiscal year is over. But we still haven't caught up in all of the payments. I know I heard from one employee that they just got a letter for a visit that they went still early on yeah. And so because of what we had explained in December, we anticipate needing those funds and being able to access those funds so that we can make our payments on time.
But we're expecting to get 1.2 million of that back
In
over time
reimbursements.
in reimbursements?
Yes, ma'am.
And then that money would stay there or go back to general fund?
Back to the fund balance.
Okay.
Yes, it's ours.
Back to the fund balance?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
I'd like to just add that, obviously, the fund balance that we've had for the 3 years was helped by ESSER funds. And the legislature has made an argument for not increasing the basic allotment because of all of the fund balances being so high. Obviously, they're going to start coming down. So as we've stated in some meetings ago, my hope is that we are going to see an increase in our basic allotment this cycle.
Yes.
And if we do, that changes a lot of this conversation, right? Would I be correct in saying that?
Absolutely,
So there could still yet be another what if in this entire scenario of what we're trying to do. 90%, 89%, 88%, whatever it is tied up in personnel. So we know most of our funding is going to personnel, which we've fought hard to retain through increases in salaries. That's where a lot of our revenue has gone. And so I'd love to see the basic allotment increase so that we can actually continue to sustain paying employees what they're worth. But I just want that to be clear. We could in April be having a very different conversation if we know what the basic allotment is going to be for next year.
Yes, sir.
Correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
And, you know, with the deficit budgets we're facing, should there be an increase in the basic allotment, we think that'll get us back to a balanced budget. But as you know, we try to forecast for years in advance, how are we going to get, you know, raises for teachers every year and for staff every year? How are we going to cover these types of expenses? So that's why we were bringing the VA TRE to everybody's forefront to make sure that not only we want to get to a balanced budget, but we want to be able to, protect the district moving forward this way. It helps us, operate, helps us keep teachers, helps us retain staff, as you were saying. So that's important for us.
I know I'm the antagonist, but I just want to put it out there. To Mr. Salinas' point, they typically attach something to whatever they give us. And
do.
and then whatever they attach to it usually costs more than what they gave us. That safety allotment was, unfunded mandates. And then they gave us the amount for the police officers, and that didn't cover what we needed to increase. They gave us the amount for you need to put film, you need to put gates. It didn't cover what we needed to do. So we oftentimes find ourselves having to pay more.
I believe, sir,
There is a bill. There is a bill, I understand, to do away with the ADA, bring it back to the enrollment. So is that correct, sir?
Oh, yeah, there's,
Make it the enrollment instead of the ADA. That
Yeah.
would help us tremendous.
absolutely. We're one of 6 states left in the United States that actually still pays off of ADA. Everybody else pays off of enrollment. So again, there's 600-plus bills, some of it kind of a hybrid where they want to pay, like, say, bilingual on enrollment, but everybody else on ADA. So there's different things that they're throwing around there. But again, there's well over 600. So what passes, I don't know.
We'll get the enrollment instead of ADA. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Quick question, do you have an idea of how much we would need in an increase in allotment to balance our budget? Do we have a
Yeah.
number?
Sure, even the state gives it to us and said if we would have increased, per inflationary costs, that the basic allotment should have gone over, well over $1,200.
Per student, okay. We're not expecting that, I'm sure.
No, we don't plan on it, but
I can even
We'll
break it
pivot if
down
they
a
give
little
it to
bit
us.
more for you.
Okay.
There's about $23.5 billion that they have available at the state, and they've got hundreds of people standing around making pitches towards a piece of that 23.5. If they were to come back and do that same increased allotment amount just for education, we're looking at about 15 or 16 billion. I doubt that they take that big of a portion of the 23.5 and say we're giving it all to education. If history is any indication of how they feel about it, I don't think they're going to come back with that much. I know I'm oversimplifying. I'm just trying to make it to where everybody can understand.
yes, sir.
And I appreciate that deeply. I think when we talked about this, people are still paying school tax to Austin. And it's been, what, 6 years, 6 or 7 years? since-
If you look at this slide, in 2018, they pay it every year, but in 2018, they made the decision to go to 6,160.
There
So
you go.
1920 was the first year that it was the 6,160.
That's correct.
But you can see that that's maintained since through 24,
Right.
25.
Right.
Then also at the top, you'll see that, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to steal your PowerPoint.
No, you're good, sir. You're good.
At the top, you'll see that utilities has increased 21%. You'll see that teacher retirement system contributions have increased 74%. You'll see that fuel costs have increased 29%, and insurance costs have increased
Wow.
251%. While simultaneously, the federal government came back, it was federal government with the SHARs, correct?
Yes.
I'm asking.
Yes, sir. You're correct.
A decrease of 1.9.
Yeah, SHARS, they did a federal audit, and they found some discrepancies, like in the 2011, 2012 system that they penalized the districts for in 24, 25, 23, 24. So we lost a chunk of SHARS money that we were expecting. That was budgeted for, actually, in the beginning of the year as well.
That was for school year 23, 24? Or
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, I remember.
They just penalized 23, 24, but it was from a separate audit that they did back from 2012, 2011, 2012.
But it hit us in that budget.
Yeah, they penalized us this year.
So what do they do, and I know this is a rhetorical question, what do they do with the money? Okay, I pay school tax. They just let it sit up there and not pay it out to the districts, and I
That's
don't
exactly
understand
what they
that.
do.
That's
I can help
kind
with
of like our
that.
fund balance. It goes to their rainy day fund.
Yes,
But
exactly.
that's not their rainy day fund. The people have paid property taxes and school taxes for the purpose of funding their school district, and we're not getting the money.
Ms. Eaton,
Yes.
Sir?
last year, they were supposed to put $4 billion towards education. When it was, when they were unable to pass the voucher bill, they did not disperse any of the $4 billion. They put it in the rainy day fund. Now they find themselves in a situation where the rainy day fund, correct me if I'm wrong, has reached a limit to where if they don't start spending some of the money out of that, then they're going to have to forfeit money from the rainy day fund. So we've got more than enough money saved in their rainy day fund. So they do just keep the money and put it in their savings account until we acquiesce to whatever. I know I'm talking way too much now, but,
Okay, can I ask a question? on
yes,
this?
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, just one point of clarification to the audience, because I know there's a lot of people watching at home are not confused.
For sure.
None of your property tax bill you pay goes to the state of Austin. So by the way, or goes to Austin. So when you pay your Bear County property tax bill, that money goes to Bear County and that money comes to Judson. None of that goes to Austin. The money Austin has is sales tax revenue and other taxes, but none of that is your property taxes.
That's true.
So I don't want people at home thinking
That's true.
Austin's stealing their property tax bill has anything to do with the money that's sitting up in Austin. That's the 8.5% sales tax they're paying and the gas tax and whatever other taxes that we do pay, because we do have a lot of taxes in Texas because we don't have an income tax. And I've lived places with really high income taxes and really low property taxes. So, when you're a retiree, it's not great. So you want an income tax because you don't have any income. On this slide, the slide is a little bit misleading, in my opinion, because this makes it sound like the state hasn't given us any more money at all over the course of 5 or 6 years. But I think what a lot of people don't understand is the state kind of changed the way they do some of the funding, right? Because this basic allotment is free money. We can use it pretty much however we want to use it, within obviously legal rules, but it is not compartmentalized always into a specific category. So what the state has done.
If he's got a different opinion, can he
Okay, so you're
articulate
saying
it?
the 6160 is compartmentalized within there? That's not what the
Yeah.
finance shows.
The summary of finance, the 6160 is built into that. Obviously, there's weighted stuff as well, but
Yes.
the percentages are the same. The reason that you think that maybe we go up or down, the 6160 has not changed. It's constant. What changes is,
The formulas, right?
well, a little bit, the formula's a little bit, but not really. What changes is the way the state said, we'd have to test kids now. So now we have more bilingual kids, we have more SPED kids, we have more GT, we have dyslexia. All those numbers have went up, while all the regular ed kids have gone down. The regular kids are all 6160. The ones where we get the weighted, so our WADA is actually higher than it was, even though the enrollment's about the same, the WADA is higher, but still the percentages are the same of how we get funded. We get more money. It looks like actually more dollars, which it is, because we have more like specialized kids between the bilingual and the SPED and all those things. But the form is still pretty much the exact same. They do give us stuff like
When they show up.
when they show up. There's like the safe security allotment wasn't there a few years ago. The early ed allotment wasn't there. So there's things that they've implemented that increases that as well, but the basic allotment has not changed.
Correct, yes. No, what they've done is change a lot of the formulas and the weighting and different types of allotments in order to give school districts more money, but make sure it's being used for very specific purposes. So we've got
Sure.
Title I, you have to use 55%. Dyslexia, the more dyslexia money, you have to use 100% type thing.
Absolutely.
So I don't want it to look like they gave us $10 back then and we're still only getting a total of $10 now, because truly, just in Tier 1, we've gone up 41 million.
Well,
41 million, according to the summaries of finance.
The way you want to look at it is we had
The
10
same
kids,
GPA.
we had 10 kids that got $10 apiece, but now there's 4 kids that get those $10, and now 6 are now bilingual or SPED that weren't classified that way 10 years ago, so now we get more
Correct.
for those 6 kids. But
Yes.
that $10 is still the same if they're a gen ed kid.
Yeah.
Nothing has changed on
Yeah,
that.
no, I don't want anybody to think that the revenue from the state, that they haven't given any more money to school districts. They have. They've just done it in very pinpointed ways, which is what a lot of people a fair amount of people we talk to about what's going to happen this legislative session, which is some more of those trends where not all the money is going to come just in one basic allotment, that there may be some other ways that they pinpoint money. And actually, like your daughter said last night, when you do get more money, a lot of it gets earmarked, right? Like you have to give teacher pay up to a certain dollar amount or a certain percentage, and those types of things. So yeah, we really can't plan for anything, because again, I've read a whole bunch of those
Yes.
$500 or $600 bills, and there's a lot of
Absolutely.
people lobbying.
There's a lot.
Of things right now. There's a lot of
There
pressure
is.
for lowering the tax rates. There's pressure for homestead exemption and using that 16 billion that's up there to alleviate the burden on taxpayers, right? And so there's
Absolutely.
a lot of people lobbying for that. And then there's people lobbying for us to get more money too. So I just want it to be clear that we are getting 25% more money than 41 million more than we did back in the 18-19 school year, just for tier one. But yes, expenses have gone up, and that's why we've been blessed to be able to do teacher raises, over time.
Yesterday, we had a conversation, and I know that the number of
Just so much.
special ed students have increased by, 1,400 kids at least?
Thank you. Our special ed population has increased, last year increased by 1,400. We're even more higher than that. So when we're talking about our gen ed kiddos, and he said gen ed 6,100 flat. You have more gen ed kids than we do have special ed kids, but the services and the personnel and all the different programs that we have to provide to our special ed population is higher than what we're actually getting from the state, because they fall into that category. Because I'm just going to use your basic numbers, Mr. Guetta, when you have the 21,000 kids total, but only 4,100 of those kids are special ed. We're actually closer to 4,800 right now, based on the numbers that we're trending right now. That's only a drop in the bucket of the 21,000 kids. So the rest of those kids are not in this special bucket where we're getting extra money from the state for. Does that make sense? And then because we do have a shortage in special ed teachers right now, we're having to do more with less, because federal government says that we cannot hire a special ed teacher unless they're certified. So you cannot put a non-certified special ed person into a classroom without the certification. So because I've been looking at, we look at numbers all the time in the special ed department. So that is a true snapshot. More needs, more support with less.
But, Ms.
Thank you for
Davis,
sharing that.
Can you, I'm sorry, I'm not cutting you off. I need you to run with this one. Can you really speak to that 55%, and we're talking about special education?
Yeah, so I wanted Dr. Duhar to speak about that, because we were looking at how much the numbers in, for example, special ed has increased. So I don't want anybody to leave with a misunderstanding that our revenue has increased. Yes, we may be receiving more revenue, but the number of students in special education has increased. So therefore, the weighted average daily, the weighted WADA, which is our weighted revenue increases. So in ratio, it's still the same. So it's not like we're receiving massive amounts of money. We have to provide more services that have increased in expenses, as you can see. Is this slide up there? Oh, yes. So how much our services have increased. So yes, we may have received more revenue, but only in terms of ratio to ratio, because our number of students have increased that receive weighted revenue, then we receive increased revenue in those terms. I can tell you that we receive state allotments. One of them is for special education, and we have to expend a certain percentage of that, 55%. But we were actually just looking at that And we wanted to make sure that we were spending accordingly. And in special education in this district, we actually spent 36 million, which is 231% of what we should have spent. So we've overspent because those are services that our students need, because those are services that we need to provide. That is just one example of the high cost of education, of yes, the state tells us, oh yes, we're going to give you an early literacy. That's another example. We're going to give you an early literacy allotment, but now you're required to offer pre-K for everybody, but they're only paying for half of it. That's not the part we hear. So we get all of these unfunded mandates. They say they give us funding. We're going to give you a safety allotment, but now you have to hire a police officer at every campus. Well, the $15,000 won't cover half of what we pay in salary to one police officer. So yes, it's true that the district has seen revenue in their tier one. We've also seen increased expenses. We've also seen increased special
Inflation
ed
costs.
students, increased bilingual students, students that need special services, services that cost more, and then increases in what we pay. Didn't you say property was 7 million more? How much?
Or general liability insurance?
Yeah.
Yeah, it went up. It was less than $1 million, like 800,000. Now it's probably 6 million almost total.
That's just one example. So I don't want anybody to leave with a misunderstanding that even though there has been increased revenue, that we're good to go.
It's meeting the needs of the district.
It's
Special
not.
ed being that one. If we're receiving an amount of 26 million, we're spending 30, whatever. And then now, out of our local budget, we're spending $8 million more than what we received to pay for those funds. And then those funds fluctuate based on, once again, when the students show up. Because if they don't come to school, we don't get paid for that day.
But we still have to pay the teacher, right? And we still have to pay the salary, but we have students that don't show up throughout the year, and then that decreases our ADA. So those are just the types of situations that I think it helps everybody to understand throughout this budget process, to continue to keep in mind as we continue to make those decisions.
And I would love if you could update us, because a month ago you told us, because I asked all of these questions about special ed a month ago, and the board was told 30 million is our annual, not 36. So I would like an updated, when you get a chance in one of the Friday notes, if we could get an updated breakdown of how that went up 6 million in a month. Because, at the time, we were 25 million, plus there's a couple other allotments, plus the federal money we get for special education. If we were spending 30, our revenue was pretty close to 30, right? So special education was getting close to a wash. So we've now somehow in a month increased our expenses by 6 million. If you could just follow up on an email with a new breakdown of that, that would be super helpful so we can keep track of that over time.
I'm not
Thank you.
entirely sure all of the numbers that you just threw out, but I would like to clarify that the numbers that I just stated is our last year's numbers that we spent from the state allotment that we received. So
Okay,
I'll need
I'm just
to go
referencing
back.
the email Dr. Field sent to the board about a month ago, and your number was 30 million. So I don't know where you got that number from.
We'll
but
go back and
yeah,
we'll
if
double
You could
check.
just follow up and get a new breakdown of how we now got to 36, that would be super helpful.
I'll be glad to.
I just wanted to just compliment all the hard work that's gone into this process. And yes, I don't want to give the impression as well to the community that we're sitting on a lot of extra revenue. So the way you explained it in terms of the increased need, yes, we get more for special ed students, but the general ed population. And I would even argue that we also know we still need more in special ed. We're still not meeting the real needs. We're doing our best, and I know we are. But there's still more. We still have to increase salaries, in my opinion, for paras, for teachers in special ed, things like that, because we know how competitive it is and how we need to work on retention. But those costs aren't even addressing the general ed population. And we also know we need more support for our students in middle school. We need more support overall, and that's general ed. And those resources, I'm sorry, we could say something, Ms. Davis?
Oh, no, I think your microphone turned off.
Oh, no, I pulled away. But bottom line is yes. So the basic allotment is fundamental. That's the general ed allocation. And yes, Austin may be trying to be strategic about where they do these increases, But in a general sense, we need the funding for transportation. We need the funding for everything that we're doing. And it's tying our hands. And again, don't underscore inflationary practices that have happened from 2019 to 2025. That makes a big difference too. So I definitely don't want to give the impression that we got a whole bunch of revenue coming. No, we're hurting. Education is hurting. It is underfunded, and things need to change.
And as you know, like in the 600-plus bills that are out there, there is a lot of special ed bills that are there. Because it used to be just kind of a blanket. Well, if it's a SPED child, then this is the weighted that they get. But as you know, there's some SPED classes that can only have one child. Some can have 10. So they're trying to hammer some of that stuff out to make sure that schools do get what they need to be able to provide for these kids. Absolutely. Again, it's a lot of bills. Yes, ma'am.
How do we get the money from the lottery? Remember when that's how they sold us on the lottery. Texas is gonna get a lottery, and we're gonna put a lot of the funds in education.
Yeah.
Huh? 2 years.
Yeah, it only lasts for the legislative group that voted on it, just like this group.
Oh, so we don't get that anymore.
It went to the rainy day fund anyway.
Yeah, she's exactly right. I know it goes into the big pot of revenue that the state takes in through sales taxes and through the lottery taxes and through the lottery money they make. It goes into that pot, and that's how they fund everything statewide. But it's not specific, like, here, this piece of lottery money actually goes to districts separate than the 6160. It's just the basic allotment's still the same, and the formulas are the same. And when you're talking about it, when we actually make, like, the state's guaranteed 6160, but they have a maximized part as well for the basic allotment. So once you reach that max, that's what's subject to recapture. And Chapter 49 districts actually have to pay that money back to the state. We're not one of those districts, thankfully, but yeah, you can only make so much per child, and then you have to pay that difference back to the state. That's called the Robin Hood thing that we talked about. Yes, but it's not a separate amount of dollars that goes to a district straight from the lottery. They use that money to fund the basic allotment. Yes, sir.
So having said all of that,
Yes, sir. Having said all that, like I said, we talked about doing a TRE, a VA TRE is now as it's called. It's a voter-approved tax ratification election. And there's a big step. We just kind of put a timeline down that we would need should we choose to go this direction as a district and board. Again, we have the disaster relief pennies that y'all approved that are good for 1 year. So once that goes away, that extra string of revenue that we've had, and we did that strategically as well with Dr. Fields to make sure that we kept the tax rate exact same it was the prior year. So everybody's paying the same tax rate that they paid the prior year to the district, but we were able to generate the $12 million more of revenue for the district. So once those disaster relief pennies go away, like I said, we're trying to just not set up to get a balanced budget. We want to set the district up for the future to make sure we can move forward for years to come, and a TRE is a good way to do it. So this is just a rough timeline that we have to do to get the TRE moving forward.
yes, ma'am. It is definitely question time.
I try and let other people go first and try and pause for a minute, so. Do we have some of the costs associated with this, all these action items? So the cost of the operational efficiency, the cost of Bear County, the approximate cost to, all the voter stuff that, whatever, all the stuff we did for the bond.
Yes, ma'am.
Type thing to get people to pass. Do we have an estimated, obviously money we don't get back if it fails, cost for this?
No, you can see the process would start after May 31st, but we just wanted to kind of bring it in front of you now to get your thoughts and to help you understand what it is. There are costs obviously associated with the election and things like that, and having to hire an attorney firm to do the opinion letter and to do the efficiency audit for the district. So there's different costs, absolutely, but it's not anything astronomical, obviously not. But there are, if you're asking there are costs associated, there are costs associated.
Okay, because, it'd be nice to see the costs with each of these items, because some of them we probably have, we know.
Yeah, of course.
Some of them are similar to when you do a bond, right? So we
Correct.
know what it costs to do the bond. Other ones, I'm sure we have friends that other districts that have tried Vaders and have done an efficiency
absolutely,
audit.
and you
And
can-
you probably give us a ballpark, so it'd be nice to see.
Do you have an
That's part of the
approximate?
process. We'll bring that to you in the next budget workshop, but just wanted to bring it to you first. We'll start getting some costs associated this way. We can start preparing if that's the direction we choose to go as a district. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
From, I guess, my fellow board members and Dr. Fields also, has anybody else started to talk to our, other elected officials in your areas about this, your mayors and your council people, other than me about the impact of this? Because this is a big impact on our cities, right? Because it affects property taxes, which affect the housing market. It affects commercial property taxes, which affect economic development. It affects what their city taxes are. If they're trying to go out for a city street bond and what the overall tax rate is on a house in these areas. I'm just wondering if any of my fellow board members have started to talk to people and gotten a little ideas of what their thoughts are on this.
We didn't want to, and again, stop me if I'm saying too much. We didn't want to hazard going out and giving the impression or talking to people about something that we haven't had approved by the board. What we're trying to do now is make this as simplistic as possible so the board understands what, I can let you know now, unless Larry and Ms. Davis or Amanda were to come back and say, hey, things changed, I'm going to be recommending this. So you're either going to say yes or no, but this is what we're going to recommend. Now, I say that to say what we did, and Larry just mentioned it, we took 3 pennies with the disaster from the INS side and moved them to M&O, which then allowed us $12 million to use to start paying salaries in the running of the district. Same tax rate, just moving the pennies from one side to another. What we're trying to articulate to the board and anyone else who's listening, that if we want to continue with that 12 million, we would have to go to the voters and get them to approve to keep the tax rate the same. There'd be no increase for the taxpayers. We would just keep it the same as it is, and then we would still be able to use that same $12 million to use for the running of the district. The only time the tax rate goes up, if we were to ask for more than what the current tax rate is. And we're not proposing that. We just want to keep the 12 million that we currently have. Because we moved the 3 pennies from one side to the other, not changing the tax rate. So this would not affect municipalities. It would not affect buildings because we're leaving the tax rate the same. We just want to keep it the way that it is.
Well, I'm not sure if that's, the problem is the state, we know the legislature is going to approve more tax compression, right? There's whatever, half the bills that are out there are some version of tax compression. So to say taxes aren't going up, well, they're not going down. So the state is going to tell Judson to reduce our tax rate. We already know. We don't know how much that is right now because we don't know how much they're going to compress the rate. But we're going to be told to drop our tax rate and be required to.
Correct.
So, because assessed values are probably going up on property. So if we don't lower to that compressed tax rate and we just keep it high, people in our community will be paying more in taxes than if they had followed the legislature's new compressed tax rate. So that's why, as appraised values have gone up and the tax rate's gone down, there's been somewhat a level of stability depending on who you are and where you live. Every house is a little bit different, right? Like some people's houses have only gone up a little bit, and some of y'all got your property tax bill and said, oh my God, my house hasn't gone up in value $50,000, what happened? Type things. But the state is going to direct us to lower our tax rate. So what this Vader is going to be is not lowering it to what the state tells us to lower it to keeping it higher than what the state is requiring, right?
I'd ask for you guys to clarify that. So we're saying that if we do a Vader, then we're not applicable to what the state mandates may be? What we're asking for is just to keep the tax rate the same as it is right now. If the state were to come back and mandate something in the interim, we would be forced to comply with that, correct?
Correct. Whatever they lower it to, should they compress it again, we're like I said, we're pretty much at the bottom of the compression at this point. So if they compress it anymore, it'll be really, really minimal. But yes, whatever they compress the rate to, if they compress it again, we want to ask for the same 3.5 pennies wherever that rate is to have the 3.5 cents.
Right, so if we're at 80 and they tell us to go down to 77, we need Vader approval to stay at 80.
Correct.
Because the tax rate, the state is going to tell us it should be 77.
No,
pay
I know what you're
these
saying.
numbers, these
That
are all
makes
just
sense.
fake numbers. But it should go down to 77, so people should see some property tax relief.
For sure.
From the rainy day fund and the 16 billion. But people in Judson will not see that tax relief if the Vader passes, because it will stay up at the 80 cents and will not get compressed.
Right, which is why we're bringing it up here, because we need the support of the board and the community to say, hey, we want to pay our teachers, we want our kids to have a good teacher in this district, so that's why we're coming for this Vader, to make sure we can have the support of the board and the community to get this Vader passed.
Do we know how many cents you're thinking about, or is it just going to be based on the maximum compressed rate and then just Vader, whatever takes us back to original?
We don't have, we know what we want to do. We want to keep the rate from going up, so
Yep.
if we can do that, then absolutely, that's what we
Okay, so
want
if it compresses 1 cent, we're going to do a 1 cent Vader. If it compresses 10 cents, we would do a 10 cent Vader.
No, but you understand, we have the disaster relief pennies at this point, so it's already at a certain rate with the disaster relief, 3.5 disaster relief pennies that we adopted this year. You understand? So those 3.5 are going to go away no matter what. So if the Vader doesn't pass, the rate's going to go down
Oh, but I
3.5
thought we were
cents plus
putting the
compression.
INS back up. I thought we only dropped INS for a year. That's how we got the 3.5 on disaster, was to drop INS 3.5. I thought when the disaster went away, we were bringing our INS back up, because we're negative on INS. We're not bringing in enough, which we have a big fund balance. in
I really need you
We
guys to
do.
step up and correct that, because we've done defeasance, and we are not in a situation where
Right,
we
we've
don't
done
have-
defeasance, we've done refunding this year that y'all approved. There's a big refunding coming up in 2026 where we can have, I think by November of '25, we can start the refunding on that as well.
Amanda, what's the fund balance in the INS?
40 million, yeah. But we are negative for this year, technically. Yes.
268,000.
Okay, that's on the next slide.
268,000 with a fund balance of 40 million in the INS.
Correct.
And again, it's dependent on collections. If we get more in collections, obviously that goes down as well. But we are able to make our bond payments as this, and like I said, the rate actually is going to go, the bond payment's going down next year. So even if the rate doesn't move, we have enough to make our bond payments.
Okay, so the plan is not to bring the INS back up.
I articulated that when we came to the board. I said that we were going to move 3.5 pennies from the INS side to the M&O side
For this year, yep.
for this year, and it was for this year only.
Yeah.
And for us to be able to continue it, we would have to come back and propose a Vader to keep the tax rate the same. We never articulated that you could take the 3.5 pennies back over to the INS side.
We can have, like I said, again, it's a little more complex than this, but I'll try to simplify it. We can have a contingency, like if the Vader does not pass, then we can raise the INS side should that happen this way. There's a incentive for them, hey, the rate's going to be this no matter what. So we can hopefully get the Vader
Oh,
passed
like a
that way.
really weird, when we pass the tax rate, it's going to have to be like weird wording of, if it passes,
There can
it's
be a
this, if it doesn't
contingency.
pass, it's this?
There can be a contingency, absolutely.
Okay, okay. Because, yeah, you don't want to go for the Vader, it fail, and not have raised the INS back up, then, okay, that makes sense. So, okay,
I just want to be clear on the articulation, go for. All we're asking for is to keep the tax rate the same.
and did you guys pull some statistics on the districts who tried for this in November? Because there was a pretty high failure rate.
It was.
So
60%.
for the next, okay, that's what I thought. For the next meeting, when we're looking at this, and when we start looking at the cost, knowing the success rate of other districts and the demographics of other districts, right? Like this has passed in Alamo Heights, completely different. That's a recapture district. Homel passed one, also a recapture district. How many non-recapture districts or districts
It passed
similar in
in
a
Austin.
property
They're not
base than
recaptured.
us? How
Passed.
many Vaders have passed in a district that would be similar, not necessarily size, I'm talking economic kind of.
Yes, ma'am, and that's part of the efficiency audit. They'll check all our peer districts, and they'll have a full report for us and for y'all as a board to make a decision as what.
Okay, and they'll tell us how successful other
absolutely.
people have been.
Yes, sir. I believe there was 62 that went up for vote this past year and 25 passed. Which is 37
That was
Okay.
in the general election this year during the presidential.
during the presidential.
You know, if you go the year before, what were the statistics?
I think it was
And
flipped
you don't
almost.
need
I
it
think it was
now.
flipped
Just-
almost. There was 60-something that passed.
It'd be good data to have down the road.
Yes, sir.
So.
I just want to articulate that if you go before the presidential election, there were more that passed than failed. But truly, during the presidential election, where you have a much larger turnout, you're absolutely correct. There were more that failed than passed.
Yeah, and I think the old ones were very much recapture districts too in the past. This was not something that
And a lot of them were in May
regular
as well.
districts seemed to do a lot of. It was the Alamo Heights and the Comals of the state of Texas.
Yes, they were,
that used
a
to
lot of them
thrive
did
in
it,
these.
a lot of them did in the May election, which is obviously not the big general election in November. But now I think we're required to do them in November.
Yeah, because it's a lot easier to sell when you go show, oh, the state of Texas is taking all our money in recapture, right? That's a much easier sales tag when you're going door to door, because then you can blame the state. They're like, oh, they're stealing your property tax money. That worked well in Alamo Heights. But you don't have that luxury when a non-recapture district is going out talking about it, which is why I think the success rates are different depending on the type of district that you are looking for.
I just, again, want to reiterate that Austin is not a recapture district, and they passed. A-Leaf is not a recapture district, and they passed. So there are districts out there who are not recapture that have been successful in doing a Vader, and they were asking for an increase of golden pennies or copper pennies. We're not asking for an increase. We're asking to keep the tax rate the same.
That's not, you want to correct them on that? That's not true, because it becomes, if they tell us to lower from 80 to 77, and we go back up to 80, that's a 3-cent penny increase.
But we're talking about if they tell us, and I'm talking about keeping the tax rate the same.
We don't know what that compression tax rate would be right
Not
now.
Not yet.
No.
So we're talking in hypotheticals.
Yes, correct.
Right?
All hypothetical.
And so right now.
I'm not talking in hypotheticals.
Correct, we are not. Ms. Ryan, when you're talking about they're going to come back and compress the tax rate, we don't know what they'll come back and compress the tax rate at.
Yep.
But due to all of the compression, we predict that it will not be too much. However, what we are asking is to keep the tax rate the same at this moment in time. And until we know what that compressed tax rate it would be, we can't make the assumption that we're asking to keep it higher.
Okay, yeah. It'd be nice to see a yield chart to say, okay, if it's 1 cent, this is about how much we get. If it's 2 cents, just so we can start thinking through those numbers in our head, what this might look like depending on how many pennies it ends up being. Which,
Hypothetically.
Absolutely.
yes.
And we will only access the
Depending on
golden
what the,
pennies. For sure.
yeah, and until we find out what the max compressed rate is, we won't know. But it'd be nice to see from 1 to 6 or something, what that might look like in terms
Yes,
of yield. 'cause
we've
it's
started
very-
to do some of that already, so
different.
we'll stick at that as soon as we can.
Okay, yeah, next meeting, that would be awesome to
Absolutely.
see, to just keep adding data to our brains, because this is the first time anybody on this board will have done it, even you, who's been here forever. So,
When we say next meeting, we're talking about the next
Next
budget
budget.
meeting?
Budget
Yes.
workshop.
Understood.
Well, and I do want to say that, again, it cannot be overlooked, the innovative practice of the disaster pennies really gave us the ability to sustain what we're doing. I can't imagine being in a $40 million deficit last year already. I mean, that makes a difference. In fact, it gave the board probably the courage to give a 1% raise that was needed for our teachers. So that really was instrumental to helping us move forward. So naturally, once I have more information, I'll be happy to talk to any of my fellow elected officials and other municipalities. But for right now, as Dr. Fields had mentioned, I've been a little bit tentative. I want to wait for the information so that we know what we're talking about, for one. But secondly, the community who I have spoken to have been apprised of how detrimental the lack of funding has been and where we find ourselves. And I've asked them, if you had a business and you're operating and you're not getting the revenue to pay your employees, how are you supposed to do your work? That's why there's a lot of teachers who are stressed and they're leaving the profession, because we can't do more to offer support. So I appreciate this timeline. I'm surprised it's all the way to May, but this is, again, you bringing it here because we asked for future discussions on budget to come earlier. Well, we're pretty early. But this gives us now a mindset for us to do our own work when we go to conferences, we talk to other colleagues in the states, and schedule the appropriate strategy behind it. But naturally, if we need to do this to maintain and sustain our work, obviously we'll continue to advocate that we support this, and I would let my community know that as well. But it's just.
And these aren't our own timelines. These are legal timelines
Yes,
that we would have to
I
follow.
know.
Absolutely.
I know the timelines in which we have to have it on the ballot for November. And I remember talking to our bond attorney last year, and they indicated November of '25 was probably the strongest time to ask for a TRE. So we're in the right position if we're going to do something like this. And then naturally, you mentioned about possibly refinancing bonds and all of that. That changes everything. We're refinancing to bring more support for infrastructure improvement, more than likely, for facilities, technology, and so forth. We're going to need to do that in a couple of years. So it makes strategic sense.
Yes, we have a good opportunity. I think, like I said, the one I talked about in '26, it's a little over $300 million that's available for refunding. So that'll help the district tremendously on the INS side.
Dr. Fields, to me, the biggest challenge we're going to face in this attempt at a VADR is communicating to the taxpayers the impact on them, because I do think they'll be resistant to a tax increase. So how you would define that, and it would take very clear wording in the actual motion that they're voting on, so that they really know what's happening. They're not going, I would say they're not going to be in favor of an increase. If we didn't get the VADR passed, what's the impact? Do we just, are we the same, or are we minus 12 million every year?
I would tell you the 12 million that we were able to bring in against the deficit this year, we would not be able to do next year.
Again, but we wouldn't be under that. We just wouldn't get that extra 12, but we wouldn't be minus.
We would be at that $40 million deficit that you saw.
We'd be back to that.
Yes, ma'am.
So,
And to your point, Ms. Stanford, you're absolutely correct. That's why I've been so adamant this evening about it's not a change. It's not an increase. Now, if the state were to come back and do something different, hypothetically,
It's not a decrease. It's all potato.
if I articulated that it's a decrease, I didn't mean to. I thought I
No,
was very specific in saying it would not change our current tax rate. That's what I'm trying to articulate. It doesn't go up. Hypothetically, if the state came back and said something, we'd have to deal with that then.
Yeah.
But I want to start now with whoever is watching this video. We are not asking for a tax increase. It would stay the same. That's what we're asking for.
yeah, so articulating that clearly, especially in writing, but I think there would actually need to be a campaign.
I understand completely. I really do.
Because people are not going to understand, why are we voting for it to stay the same? Why do we even
Exactly.
have to do that?
That's one, yes.
So communication will be key in this whole thing. That's my concern about it. I still think it was worth doing what we did, but now communicating to the community, because they won't like even the insinuation of an increase. And we would need to show what we're willing to do to reduce our costs before we go to them for more cost.
And I think that we did a yeoman's job this year. We did the property tax,
Property value study audit?
the property value study audit, received funds back, did another year, and we did 2 last year, correct?
Yes,
And then we have another one in the works right now.
correct.
And then we had the 12 pennies, which garnered the 3
The 3 pennies that
Three-
yielded 12
3
million.
pennies, not 12.
Plus the 2 property value study audits that yielded 5 million this year. So just this year, with the additional efforts that have been made, that's 12 plus 5, that have helped us decrease our $40 million deficit. That's why you're not really seeing 40 million right now. But next year, if the VADR is not passed, that 12 million was only a one-time.
Right.
And we can't go back and audit the years again.
Right, so, and those 5 million that
Those are
we
done.
received from the property value study audit, those are one-time. So that's money that we cannot anticipate to receive again. So all Dr. Fields is asking, and I'm going to reiterate
Thank
it
you.
one more time for him, all we did was shifted 3 pennies from one bucket to the other side, keeping the tax rate the same. But we can only do that for 1 year. So those 3 pennies that gave us the additional 12 million, bye-bye.
Can only stay.
Yes. The only way they can stay is if we pass the Vader,
Right.
and then we can continue. So he's not asking to increase more pennies. Those 3 pennies, that's it. That kept that tax rate the same for our community.
So we'd be able to move 12 million again from INS? We do that?
It would stay.
It would just stay in M&O.
Does it impact INS negatively?
No, because please remember that
Okay, just
we are in a
making
very good position. Over the last 2 years, we defeased 13 million, and then again, I can't remember, 2 million.
But we wouldn't be able to keep doing that.
But Ms. Davis, you guys, we're talking at a real high level, and I really want you to break down defease. We're using
Yeah,
words that
because
most
the
people don't
community
No,
needs
understand.
thank
to
you so much for
understand.
saying that. So defeasance means
Pay down.
basically, making a payment.
Double
Extra
payment.
payment, an extra payment.
payment. So
That's how
2
much
years
money we
ago,
were collecting
We were
on
able
the
to make an
INS.
extra payment of 13 million to our INS, which is our mortgage payment. Let's call it that, so
Yeah.
that everybody understands that. Then last year, we were able to make an extra payment to the mortgage for an extra 2 million. Then Mr. Guerra just explained that we're in a position to
Refund.
do refundings, which, use another term.
Refund.
Refinance.
Refinance. We're trying to use layman's terms here
We
so
need
that
to.
everybody can understand.
Yeah.
And so we're not worried about our INS side. We are worried about our maintenance and operations side because
Right.
we're in a $40 million deficit
Right.
that right now appears to be a little less because of the one-time disaster penny action that yielded 12 million to the district, and because of our one-time property value study audit, big fancy word, that yielded 5 million to the district. We are not going to see that again next year, ma'am. So that's why we're going back to the public. The only way we can keep that additional 12 million revenue that we yielded this year is if we pass a Vader, keeping that tax rate the same. We're not going to ask for more.
So the
Not gonna ask
INS,
for
though,
more.
the impact on the INS,
It will stay the same.
The mortgage
We don't
payment.
take 3 pennies away again.
right, and we're not paying less, we're just paying what's due.
We're paying
We're not
what's
paying
due,
more.
and we have enough money to pay what's due because we have 40 million.
Okay, so we keep up to speed on the INS payments. We don't go underwater there. We're even,
Correct.
making our normal payments
Yes,
to the
ma'am.
mortgage.
Yes, ma'am.
And then we would gain extra on the M&O side.
Yes, ma'am.
And so-
And that's where we need it.
Right, so right now, all things being equal, we would just need the community to understand that we're not asking for an increase, and if the state comes in with something different, that we have to reevaluate and recommunicate. But my concern is the understanding the community's going to get. Because
Correct.
it's going to be confusing to see that on,
I appreciate what you just said, Ms. Stanford, and I'd say this, and then I'm going to try and acquiesce. We came to the board because of the disaster pennies, and the rule is the board can vote to move pennies from the INS side to the M&O side for 1 year.
Correct.
The board can vote on that. The board voted on that, that's what we did. For those pennies to stay on the M&O side,
Clarification.
the voters have to approve it. So we have to go out to the voters and say, hey, we did this in an effort to put
we keep doing
the-
it?
We need to keep doing it, can we keep doing it? That's what we're asking. Is that an
Just a little
oversimplification?
point of clarification.
Yeah, just a little clarification. Like I said, as CFO, I never would have recommended the disaster relief pennies, even though they were available, if I didn't think we could defease the bonds or refund them at the same time. When I knew we could do that and still be able to make our bond payment, because our bond payment's structured for the next 30 years. Even when we refund it, they change the structure, but the structure's there for 30 years. So we make sure that the bond payment was going to go down to make sure that thing was there. So I never would have recommended the 3.5 pennies to increase due to disaster relief if we couldn't defease on the, it wasn't we just got them from INS and moved them over. We made sure we could lower that INS payment before we even thought about using disaster relief pennies.
And that's for how long down the road? The whole,
The INS side is set. Like I said, the structure's for 30 years, and we can make our payment for 30 years based on the rate we have now and based on.
okay. We wouldn't be paying
property values.
extra like we wouldn't be defeasing or paying extra. We'd be paying what's due.
Correct. Like I said, there's a big refunding coming up at the end of next year, but we always have the option to defease or refund when those bonds come available to do so.
She's asking, will we have the funds available in the future to be able to make a double payment?
Absolutely. That's what I'm saying.
We got a $40 million fund balance.
Absolutely, we can start defeasing again, for sure.
Okay. so-
And there's a chance that it could even happen this year. If we collect more from our taxes than, coming in from the INS, and this negative, did y'all go to the next slide already?
We can go to that. Yeah.
Okay.
That's it, right there.
So if you look at the
Right now.
The chart on the-
Right now, not end of the year, and there's $40 million in the
At
fund.
the table on the right side, you can see in the very bottom that we have 40 million. And yes, it shows a negative 268,000, but that's only if we collect that amount of revenue. And on the very top, the revenue is 54.5 million. I know over the years being here, we actually collect more than that, but we have to
We're always
assume
conservative.
that we're going to collect less. So if that were to go past and we collect an extra million, then we can defease something for 1 million. So it can happen, we just
Can I
need,
recommend a paper? So there's the chart. You know what chart I'm talking about? That shows every year what our mandatory payments are on all of our bonds. That may be helpful to send out to us, and you could write a little note next to, we hope to defease this year, we hope to whatever this year type thing, but I've seen it at Bear County. There is, essentially, the amortization schedule on your mortgage, there's almost the equivalent of that.
Absolutely.
For all of our bonds that they have access to, and that may be just a helpful document to make this all more clear. So it shows you how much we owe, 10 million this year, 76 million the next year, 20 million the next year type thing.
Yeah, you see, it's $54.8 million that's the bond payment this year. Next year, that bond payment goes down to, I think, 52, and then to 49. So it drops because that's how we structure it, to make sure we can make the payments every year.
All right, and people understand it in terms of a mortgage payment. And they understand making the required payment versus making more than. They understand the idea of paying extra to pay your balance down quicker. That's
Sure.
common
And like I said, if we
understanding.
think as a business office, like I said, there's $40 million, and if we want to make a defeasance payment, we can do that with the fund balance as well. There's stuff we can do, and like I said, having 40 million is extremely healthy on the INS side.
So the advantage to us as a district for defeasing, or in other words, paying more than the required payment is what?
Obviously, we save on interest that we'd pay over the
Well,
30 years of the bond.
Okay, so like for any mortgage holder, it's,
Right.
you pay it off
We just
earlier.
did the refunding, and it saved $3.1 million of interest that we would have paid throughout the length of the
Does
bond.
it change our rating, for example, if we're defeasing quicker?
Sure, obviously, we
Okay.
have less debt against revenue, for sure.
But that's how we got to the superior rating that we're at
Yes.
right now.
That all factors into the first rating.
Yeah, so it's going to be a communication challenge, I think, so that the
It is.
public understands what we're asking for.
If
Right.
any of us are unclear on the fact that it's not an increase, that doesn't help. If this is the first time that we're speaking about this out loud, I really just needed to go out that we just want to keep the tax rate the same. Next slide.
Okay, so obviously there's challenges, as we know. Again, with the legislature being in session, the 189th session just started on the 14th. We still budget according to current law. If something changes, obviously, we'll be ready to pivot, we're ready to make those changes. If not, then we go forward with the plan as set. Again, we set the budget, and after that, it's all actual revenues and expenditures. So,
I guess I'm trying to figure out the real way ahead because, and this kind of goes back to the messaging that we're going to have to do also with Evader, which is, we're talking a lot about the revenue side of the house, and we're not talking about expenses at all, right? Great job, amazing job by everyone increasing our revenue in Judson ISD. So there's no, don't ever think I'm debating that you have not done an amazing revenue side of the house. The question becomes, what are we doing on the expense side of the house? Because we're at $276 million in expenses each year, right? That is up hugely over the last 5 or 6 years, lots of increased expenses. So if we're at 276, we'll see if everybody can follow my math. You just said ADA decrease of 10%, which means expenses have to drop 10%. So that's 27 million, just on ADA alone, nothing else in the factors, none of this Vader or the state. That's 27 million that we need to reduce off of our expenses, just for the ADA that you briefed in here. Then, if disaster pennies go away and Vader doesn't get passed, well, now we're at another 12 million. So on the budget, I'm talking about the budget we need to pass, which is our worst case budget, right? We're assuming Vader, we can't plan for the Vader and we can't plan for the state, right? So now that's 27 we have to cut plus 12. And then that's still going to leave us at least a 25, no, the property tax, $28 or $29 million deficit. The question becomes, what kind of budget do we want to pass next year? What number are we comfortable with, assuming we don't get any extra money? What number is this board comfortable with getting to so that when you guys go back and start doing your planning, I feel like we need to give you some guidance. Like, we're not happy going below 75 million or 75 days in our fund reserve, aka 56 million, right? Like, that might be a goal. In which case, then you've got a dollar amount that you've got to go back and tweak and start adjusting the budget. Because I guess in my mind, how this would have to go is like literally lists of hundreds of things that may get reduced, right? And they would have to be prioritized, right? Because if all of a sudden we get money from the state for something, right? We got to be ready to add things back in. Does that make sense?
No, ma'am.
So what kind of budget are we going to pass? Just a negative $90 million deficit budget and hope?
I don't know how you got the 90, but we just passed a $37 million deficit budget last June, if I'm correct. We came with 36 based on the recommendations of the board, and then that night, we added on another million. So I would say this, we are going to look at, and I've said this for the last 2 years in a row, we cannot cut to a balanced budget based on where we're at. I think I've said that out loud. So if there's any impression around this table that we can bring back cuts throughout the district that are going to decrease us by $37 million, we can't get there.
possible.
Not without compromising the education of students in Judson ISD. It's impossible. That's why when we were, I'm just trying to be honest with everyone.
Well, I'm trying to understand the math. So if we're negative 40, because remember disaster pennies are going away. So we're
Well,
negative
you're
40
doing
right now.
cost per child, and you're trying to do it against ADA, and that's not the correct way to do it. If you want us to get you numbers, we'll get you numbers, but don't throw out numbers like that, because that doesn't make any sense, and it's not correct. I'm sorry.
So if our ADA goes down 10%, we will receive
And you're doing
10%
it,
less in
but you're doing it
revenue,
off
but we're
per
not gonna
child,
cut
but it's not, it
10%.
doesn't work that way.
No, we are going to bring back recommendations for decreases. And they're going to be hard conversations. And they're going to be in areas that have been coveted. But if you're asking, are we going to bring back decreases that amount to balancing a budget? That's not going to happen.
Oh, no, I
So
didn't
that's
say
why
balance.
we're
I was trying to
advocating
do
for other
77
things
million.
like, but we're not, that's why we're advocating for increasing, or keeping the tax rate the same and getting the 12 million. Talking to our legislature, saying, hey, we need to increase the ADA. There's got to be other avenues that we take other than looking at us as an administrative team when it took years to get here, to now say, we want you to bring back enough cuts to balance the budget. When I've been saying for the last 2 years, you cannot cut your way to a balanced budget. So
I guess it's just going to be a hard sell in the community, because I have started to talk to council members and mayors and trying to get their temperature, and some community members, and I'll tell you the feedback is, why has Judson cut nothing and your expenses have only gone up? Why do you have 5 assistant principals at a school with only less than 600 kids? Why are some of your schools at a 1-to-11 or 1-to-12 ratio in their classrooms? What have you cut? So just so you know, people are paying attention to Judson, and the fact that all we've done is focus on revenue and not cut significantly, it's not playing well in the community with either the elected officials or the voters, because remember, we're talking this many people are going to vote in that election. And you have to get people to show up to vote yes, because it is a property tax increase from the aspect of, hold on, before y'all roll your eyes.
because you know
Understand why the state of Texas requires the language on the ballot to say it is a property tax increase. Do you know why it's like that?
Because
It's
they hate
because it is not a decrease. If it does not pass, your taxes will be X. If it does pass, your taxes will be Y. So if it doesn't pass, your taxes will be lower. That is why they require in the state of Texas that it's a property tax increase, because your taxes will be higher than if it did not pass at all.
But they don't require that from any other entity.
Oh, correct. I mean, we can
So
complain about
it's
Austin, but we don't
targeted at-
control them. And also the other issue, and I don't know if Mr. Salinas was in the session with me or someone else, there are also bills out there that is going to put some handcuffs on the district in terms of what you can and cannot say to get this passed. So
Definitely.
some of
But
the stuff,
that's
and they're going to change the rules, and you're not going to, a lot of the marketing we were able to do for the bond, showing all this numbers and data and all that kind of stuff, there is a chance that those are going to get passed
hypothetical.
that are, yeah, there's bills out there. And this is what one of the advocates at the conference we went to was talking very specifically about the likelihood of that one going through, which is going to limit us. So,
But
yeah,
still
it's gonna be
hypothetically, and
interesting.
we're still
Cross the bridge
being
when we get
limited
to it.
to the same language that we were limited to when we passed the last bond. So to
Correct,
give
because
the
that-
impression that we can't do something that we did in the last bond, when they take
No, I'm
away the
talking the
hypothetical.
marketing materials. All the marketing materials that were produced and a lot of the stuff that we did for the bond, there are bills being put forward that would stop Judson as a district, not board members, we can do whatever we want. But there is stuff to limit your production of even informational flyers and other things. So I would keep an eye on those bills too, just to know
That happens
how
every
it would
legislative
fit.
session.
Yeah.
Correct.
Happens every
And
legislative.
correct, and I don't believe every bill that goes out there, but this was at the big.
No, there's
tax
changes every
conference.
legislative session, and we prepare for that, and we
Right, and if they came
Absolutely. It's
back
not-
and
hadn't
told
been
us
the
we
same
couldn't
last
do it, we
Okay.
wouldn't do it.
And during the bond campaign, we were already limited on what we could say in marketing materials, so that's something that we could work with.
Correct.
That's why it was really important before the board actually passed the bond to speak about what we were going to ask the voters to do.
Because once you
articulate
said
clearly,
it.
Because once you pass that, then those restrictions come in. So we're aware of that, and
Yeah, they
we'll
were
be
just
able to
concerned there was
pivot.
going to be more restrictions.
Sure, but we're-
Is what
but-
the TASB conference was briefing.
Absolutely,
that
but
you would be
we're
restricted
already
even more.
working our hands against the wall for bond campaigns and things like that, so we'll be able to pivot. But it is important to send the message prior to that decision so that we are clear with our community about what is really happening and what we intend to do. So that's also an important part of marketing and campaigning for an election that you may approve.
So Dr. Fields, could you clarify, if we didn't get the Vader passed, if they said no, do their taxes go down?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, they will.
Okay,
because those 3.5 pennies won't go back to the INS side.
so the community would
It would go
experience,
down from what you're paying right now.
they would experience a tax decrease.
They'd experience a
Okay.
tax decrease. But
That's
it
a-
would be different from what the taxes, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong.
You're right, but it's a tax rate decrease. I mean, their taxes can still go up because their property values get assessed by the state. So if they raise
Right,
their
but-
their value of their house, even though their tax got compressed, whatever
But the
got
rate-
compressed.
the rate
they-
would go
But it's
The
not
rate would
an
go down, but they
increase.
still may pay more. So that,
But it's not an increase.
if we want to speak in pure hypotheticals,
Well-
yeah, that can happen too.
Depends on how you look at it.
If that's how they're being given the choice of keep it here or come here, that's tempting, I think, for citizens. So again, that makes our communication even more important for how it would, I'm thinking what I would like to see, and myself, and what the community might appreciate, I don't know, is if we had some red line definitions, like if our revenue drops to this and our ADA drops to this, at this point, we close a school. At this point, we do this. If we had red line,
I hear what you're
do
saying.
you see what I'm saying?
I do.
Like,
I do,
we're
I
willing
do.
to do this, if we actually fall to this, that would, I think, indicate that we're thinking about it, but would give me a sense of confidence that, okay, if we hit these numbers, we have an action to consider.
Understood. But again, if we go back through the slides, pre-COVID, we were at 76 and 78 million. At the end of this year, we should be at 76 million. So we're saying that if we drop lower than that afterwards, then we could close the school. If the board were to come back, you're the board.
No, it's
You're-
like, what would it take? You know, what would
It
it
takes
take?
cutting teachers, that's where the money is. Our money is in salaries. And
In
so the
personnel.
only way to truly affect a change at that order is to reduce our personnel.
Right, so,
And so that means teachers, that means administrators, that means
Right.
everybody. That's the only way to really cut our budget.
so that's something, I'd be curious as what it would take for you, Dr. Fields, to say to the board, you know what? We need to take this drastic action. We're going to need to close a school. I'd be curious to know, what would it take for you to reach that point?
I would tell you what it would take for me to reach that point is if we got into a situation where those 3 people over there came back to me and said, I don't think that we can maintain at the pace that we're going. This is what we need to do. Then I would sit down with a pencil, pull in Dr. Toppin and Dr. Taganon and Dr. Saunders and everybody on the cabinet and say, look, we're here. Now we're doing all those recommendations, but we're not here yet. And I've been very clear about this for the last 2 years. We are putting ourselves in a position where we can't cut ourselves into a balanced budget. And now that we're here, I'm getting this look of surprise and shock.
No?
So what I'm saying is, we're not there yet. When we get there, I assure you, we will be back saying we need to do this and we need to do that. But I don't want to send a scare throughout the district when just this conversation is, we're not there yet.
But
We're
you
not
have an
there yet.
idea yourself.
We have an
Okay.
idea of how we could move forward, and we will bring back that recommendation. And if what we're recommending happens, based on what we project, we will be back to a balanced budget eventually, because I do not think that the state is going to continue at the pace that they're at.
You know, I think it's good for the community to hear that. Our intention is to have a balanced budget.
Our intention is to have a
Is to
balanced
get,
budget.
is to get there.
Right,
Yeah, and we can't do it overnight.
not at all.
Understood.
Yes, ma'am.
I do want to say, too, that you didn't look at me, because I would not give you that look of surprise. I've been echoing the same sentiment. We cannot cut that drastic portion of a budget and expect to maintain our operations. And right now, our goal, our responsibility is to provide educational services to students in our community. So we'll do it. And I've mentioned to you earlier, the legislature, those that I've spoken to, are looking at fund balances at districts. They're saying, you guys aren't broke. You guys are talking to me broke. You got all these millions of dollars in the fund balance. So I've stated on record, we got to use our fund balance. I mean, that's what we're being forced to do. If we don't, then we sacrifice services to students, which is not what we're here to do. We're here to provide services, quality services to students. So I would also say the last bond election, I had multiple municipalities, council members, and mayors supporting the bond initiative. I imagine when we're ready to go for a VA Vader, that we would have those same conversations and be able to address those questions. It's premature to give real specifics yet, since we can't give specifics on how things are going to be. So I would dare say any mayor or council member that's concerned, they don't even have all the data yet, and I trust that they would do their research. So in terms of expenses and revenue, this is the initial conversation, if you will, right? We're just getting our feet wet on the budget. Yes, we have to talk a lot about expenses, but there's a lot of variables. We started the whole conversation saying we may be funded more by the state. There's a lot of ifs in the equation, but let's just not get too far ahead. Let's start planning. But if we send that message, as Dr. Fields states, that we're going to cut $36 million from our budget, that doesn't give confidence to employees that we're serious about retaining talent. Everyone's going to say we're out of here, because all the other districts aren't saying that. There's no way to say we're going to cut $40 million next year. No one is saying that, because it's not viable. The state has a responsibility, and I maintain that. As part of the legislative committee, we're going to continue to echo the state's responsibility to fund education. And that's going to be much louder as we organize. So I've already said to AFT that I'm going to go up with them this legislative cycle to talk to our representatives. Teachers need to be paid. So that's sort of my sense. And just don't get caught up too much on the ifs. I know I started earlier with saying let's have a contingency. Let's just plan for the contingency. We're not at that worst case scenario yet, but let's plan for it and let's move forward.
All right. So we are now finished with item 3A. Let's take a short 10-minute break and come back and reset for the program review section. So we are going to take a break at 6:51 p.m. Okay, great, thank you. All right, so we are back at 7:02 PM, and for the record, Ms. Ryan left during the break. So now we're moving on to item 4, program review. Dr. Fields, you wanted to go ahead and have business and finance since they're already up here?
Yes, ma'am, if we could, please. Go ahead.
Well, some of the strategies that we implemented this year, we've already discussed. Ours will be brief, since some of the strategies, key strategies that we've implemented this year in finance, we've already discussed. One of them is, of course, the disaster relief pennies that yielded an additional $12 million to the district. Another strategy is we utilize federal funds and other grants to support our payroll costs to offset our local fund, academic programming and professional development to offset district local fund costs. And one example is we use larger school action fund grants, federal grants like LASSO, and title grants to support some additional personnel like RTI teachers who work with our students that are at risk. Another key strategy is we work specifically with departments to start developing our budget for next year, and we ensure that our state mandated allotment spending meets the requirements. Results to date, again, we've mentioned the $12 million in revenue. We've also talked about the property value study audits that yielded so far $5 million this year. We conducted 2 last year that also brought in
5.2 million.
5.2 million as well. So we're trying to increase our revenue. And something to note, in the previous years when we first transitioned, TEA had notified the district about not meeting some of the state mandated allotments. We received, of course, as you know, in December, a clean audit. And so we were very, very excited about that. We stand ready for questions.
Just looking at the top of the flyer, the handout, we have a budget of $680,000 for the 23-24 school year.
Yes, ma'am.
And for 24-25, you're recommending $880.
Correct.
So I'm just curious as to what's in that increase. It's about a 29% increase? And is-
Actually, that's our current budget right now, our current revised budget, 880. So we're not asking for it, we already have it.
Oh, okay.
The reason why we have that much is because 213,000 was to pay Purdue Brandon for their property tax audit survey. So it increased. So we started with 600 and something, and then it went up to 213.
The audit was what, 200?
It was 213,000.
Okay.
And that's the one that we received 2.8 million.
Got it, thank you.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you for all your hard work. Really appreciate you.
Mr. Salinas had one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
question.
Mr. Salinas?
What's the latest on the 16 acres? Did it go out for bids again? The land that you were selling over there by,
Mr. Salinas is asking about the land next to the maintenance department that we put out for bid and received one that was much lower than what the appraisal is.
right.
So he's
and I thought
asking
we're gonna put it back to
appraise.
half.
Yes, sir, that's the plan. What we did is we called for another appraisal just to make sure the land is what it was when we had it appraised a few years ago. So we're going to look at the appraisal and then go from there and then repost it.
Oh, okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank
Thank
you very
you.
much.
Thank you.
And who did you want next, Dr. Fields? You want to go
whoever's
with
next on the list.
technology, safety, and security?
Good evening, everyone.
I am here to represent JTech, which incorporates the PEAMS Department, Desktop Services, Systems, Cybersecurity, Network, Data Systems, Instructional Technology Library, Instructional Materials, and Safety and Security. Our target population is always to meet the needs of our students and staff across the district for anything within the community. We had 3 major strategies that we focused on this past year. The first covers the majority of our technology departments, being Network, Systems, Cybersecurity, Desktop Services, and our support for the Business and HR department. And that had to do with the purchase and installation of devices for all of our students and all of our staff, coming out of a local fund budget of $6.6 million out of the $7.6 million that was allocated to the department, which was a little bit of a decrease from the prior year. In safety and security, we focused on the standardization of our practices and procedures to meet district mandated areas. We utilize Cycle 2 grant funds as well as our local funds in order to help support that. Obviously, the Bond 2022 project supports that particular area as well. In the area of student support, we have designed and developed multiple quality staff development components to definitely support our campus librarians as well as the instructional technology department, and offer a variety of trainings across the district to help support the use of technology within the classroom and to support the curriculum of the district. In terms of our results, we have successfully provided a new staff device to every teacher in the district. We have 1 campus remaining next week that we will complete at Veterans High School. Otherwise, all campuses have been addressed, and then we will move to central and district office to provide everyone with an updated device. For students, we have traded out all of the elementary Chromebooks, so they have brand new Chromebooks. For our secondary students, we have new ones for them, and we are providing them as needed, but did not want to interrupt instruction at this time since we are a one-to-one, and so we will definitely swap out. They will receive all new ones at the beginning of next year, and the new ones will go out as needed. In terms of the safety and security, we definitely focused on our Cycle 2 grants, which had to do with mapping software to cover all of our campuses for maintenance locations for fire extinguishers, AEDs, stop the bleed, first aid, roof access, and more. That includes also panic buttons that we are installing on the campus, as well as support for the police department. We also developed monthly structures to provide training and support through instructional technology library and also our PEAMS department, which, by the way, has helped to make sure our data is accurate to the point that we are one of the few districts who is able to turn in all of our fall semester PEAMS reporting as well as mid-year a week early, while others are still trying to get that done, and the state has actually extended it because so many people had issues. So I want to give some real props to that particular group, as well as the work done across our entire department in achieving the other areas. As far as support, we are looking for financial support as we begin to increase the safety and security within our department. We are looking, currently we funded that particular area out of the budgeted funds that I had, and that is around $350,000. We are hoping as we move into next year that with the existing budget that we have, I can attribute about $50,000 to that, but to be able to cover those costs for those particular areas. I stand to answer any questions that you may have. Yes, sir.
One of your departments is the police department, right?
The police department is not in my department. I have the Department of Safety and Security. So we handle cameras, we handle access control, guest management, we handle fire extinguishers, we handle elevators, and site safety security from the physical standpoint. Yes, sir.
Ms. Stanford?
Regarding the Chromebooks, laptops, that kind of thing that go to the students, what's our current policy on replacement, or if they lose it or break it?
Okay, so we are revising the policy as we move into next year for that. However, if it is accidental damage, that is covered for the student. We do provide one swap out for that. If the damage continues, we do charge families for those changes. And that is allowable by policy.
Right, so they get one
Yes, ma'am.
replacement.
One replacement when, if something
When
happens.
it's warranted.
If we can tell that it is a, accidental, obviously a kindergartner with the device, they may fall down more than once. We can do some of those swap outs. However, anytime that it is determined that it is on purpose, and we can tell our repeat offenders, then we do begin to charge the
Okay,
families.
so
for
if they lose it, do they get one?
If they lose it, we do require that they file a police report with the police department, and we can replace those as long as we have a report that shows what happened to the device, but that's a one-time only.
One time, too?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Yes, I have a question.
Mr. Macias?
Just revisiting the concerns we had on access and, some of the past times where we've had actually personnel having to open and close doors. Has that been rectified throughout the district?
Yes, sir. For the most part, that has been rectified through the district. We have completed the exterior buildings in terms of installing the access control in all of those areas. We have some interior doors that we are still continuing to work on through the Bond 2022 project.
Okay, so soon that should be then addressed as well.
Yes, sir.
In a certain time. And then the other part was, we last year had some concerns when we needed parents to check in, and we had lines, and I think we're talking about updating our ability to check in parents and stuff when we have those type of mass events. Has that been addressed?
Yes, so we have purchased additional units, so when we do have mass events, we have a couple of things we can do. We have additional units that we can provide to the campus for those types of events. We can also use QR codes for people to scan with their phone. They can check in on their phone. And we also have the ability through the system to be able to send it out in advance for people to register, and then when they show up, they can identify and pick up their badge.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Eaton?
How are we doing with our vestibules?
How are we doing? I'm sorry?
With the vestibules?
The vestibules would be Mr. Brooks' department, ma'am.
Oh, okay.
Construction, yeah.
Okay, I'll wait
No,
till.
he's not coming up, so.
Oh.
He's not coming up. Mr. Brooks, did you answer?
Yeah, we're not on the agenda for tonight. We're in the process of finishing up the last few that were on the bond list. I think it was Wagner.
Kenny
Hawk, Jecka, and a couple others. But we're in the last phase of those last few we're in the process of doing that right now.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question, but because it's a security question, I'll wait till we're done to
Okay.
ask.
All right, anyone else? No? Thank you again, Dr. Gosh.
Thank you, ma'am. Next would be the police department.
Good afternoon. Oh, I'm sorry, good evening. Lieutenant Resendez, Chief Ramon sends her apologies. She wasn't able to be here with you tonight. She had a medical procedure done over the holidays, so she couldn't be here today. So our target population, of course, is 56 square miles of Judson, to include the 23,400 students and 3,000 plus employees that we have here in our district. So this year, we concentrated on three key strategies. First one was to bolster our recruitment, so that way we could continue to have 2 officers at every high school, 1 at every middle school, and 1 at every elementary. Another key strategy that we implemented was providing training. I was able to provide CRACE training to all our employees. And as well, it was reported in the past that potentially we may not have been in compliance with all our lockdowns. So we are assisting our safety and security director with the lockdowns. We set them up, we record them, we conduct them, and then we debrief with all our principals after they are done. Also, we're in collaboration with our admin to find some space through the grant, Safe and Cycle grant. We're able to buy a simulator. So to put it in full force, we need some space. And as you know, the department is growing. We are outgrowing our current police department. So we need some space to set it up, not only for us, but to work with our CTE students and train the law enforcement training for them. So currently we have 35 full-time officers. We're in the process of hiring 2. The chief should be submitting their names for hire in the next couple of days. We have one that's still in the background phase. I'm almost done with him. It's kind of extensive, but I'm almost done. Last year, the board approved with the recruitment that we could potentially, a non-certified person who would want to be a peace officer, we would send them to the academy. One is about to start on Tuesday, and she should graduate probably next July, August. Take some time to get certified. So with y'all's approval and your help, we're getting that done.
And they'll be reimbursed for the.
Yes, so the deal is, the first year, they have to stay 2 years with us. In the first year, they would be reimbursed $2,000, and in the second year, they would be reimbursed the remainder of what's left of their commitment to the academy, which would be another $1,500. I think it's a total of $3,500, depending.
Depending on which academy. Right.
Correct. So lastly, our support for next year. As you well know, we are the fourth largest district in San Antonio, and we do not have a independent communications dispatching unit. We are ending our contract with Live Oak, who's been servicing Judson for the last number of years. We are potentially going over to Kirby, and we're going to try with them. But I think if we separate our own dispatcher, would be a great start, because in the future, we really would like to have our own communications in-house, which would benefit the whole district to have our own dispatching. So we really need a dispatcher to concentrate strictly on the radio, helping with the lockdowns, and alleviate some of the work from our secretary. Any questions?
I wanted to ask you about the vehicles. How are we doing in vehicles? You have some already that have enough mileage that they need to be
Yes, sir.
purchased?
Our fleet
Are you
man,
taking that before the board, or?
Yes, sir.
To the superintendent, I'm sorry.
we were able, through the grant, the Safe Cycle grant, we were able to purchase a new pickup truck, and we received a pickup truck, I believe last year. So we are currently evaluating the mileage on our cars that need to be replaced, and the chief will be bringing a proposal to the board to get more vehicles. She is working on it.
Anyone else?
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead, Mr. Macias.
So just remind me, when is the Live Oak contract coming to an end?
It should be in June the 30th.
June 30th. So, Dr. Fields?
I apologize.
No, it's okay. So we do have an opportunity to entertain this request to have a position. What is the position called?
It's a communications dispatcher.
And that would alleviate the need for us to even contract with another municipality.
Unfortunately, not at this time. So right now, our secretary, and she's basically doing 3 jobs, receptionist job. So
What he's trying to say, LT, is that if we were to hire or create that position, then we wouldn't have to contract out.
no, that wouldn't be possible, not yet.
Okay, good. So is this going to be your recommendation to do this?
We will sit down and
Take a look
we'll
at it.
see as we go forward, but as we just discussed with the budget, we're trying to be as conservative as possible.
Well, I mean, obviously, we still have to do something
We
with,
still have to pay another.
so I see this as a possibility, but that's fine. I understand that and appreciate that clarification. The other thing is, we did have a out-of-term discussion on compensation for police officers earlier this year, and the reason for that importance is naturally so that we can have the appropriate personnel in terms of recruitment and retention. So I'm really happy to see that we have one individual already coming out of this training initiative that we launched, and hopefully more to come, because I mean this is a good opportunity. But in terms of compensation, I guess we'll evaluate that to go forward, because naturally all the other districts are trying to be just as competitive with salary for police officers, so we can't really let our eye off of that, because quickly we're going to be in a position where we don't have police officers on campuses, and I do not want to be in that position. So is that agreeable?
Understand completely. I would tell you that even in the audit, one of the areas of concern when it came to compensation was the police officers, but once again, we just had a real long lengthy conversation about. So we will sit down, try and prioritize, bring that back to the board, and then you can let us know where you would like to start.
I appreciate it. Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
Ms. Eaton?
The building that you all are currently in,
Yes, ma'am.
did they put the sink in, the hot water heater for the bathroom?
I believe they're still in the process of doing that. They were having some complications because it's so antiquated that if they were to add some more electricity, the building's not built to handle the electricity. They did try to come out and take care of it. So with the growth and planning meeting, if it goes through, we plan to move next door where, I guess the plan would be that we'd take over where alternative is at. So that would be a little more conducive for us where we'd be able to have some space.
Okay, and then that way, once we get this radio operator fully trained and stuff, they'll be able to be housed in there.
Yes, ma'am. That's what we were planning to do, is move her over to, well, the communications, we move in a new building. We'd have a conference room. We'd have a training facility to set up the simulator, so we wouldn't have to be so mobile. And then we'd be able to also offer training to other police agencies to come train with us to learn our schools.
Oh, good.
I was waiting for Mr. Brooks to jump in here, but
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was waiting for Mr. Brooks to jump in. And we just had a meeting on Monday, I believe it was, where we sat down and entertained interest in repurposing of Coronado. And one of the people that came over and spoke was Chief Ramon. I don't want to give the impression to anybody who's listening that there's been some type of predetermined decision out there that something's going to happen with Coronado. We are still going through that process. We're still soliciting recommendations. And if this comes to fruition, then that happens. But we're not sure that that would even be the recommendation that we make at this point. I just don't want to give the impression that a decision's been made on Coronado that alternative schools going over there, because we had a bunch of people who came in and advocated against that as well. So
And what I was going to say is that this is just a proposal of what he would like to see, because it
This is the
states
wish
we're
list.
asking-
Right.
Yes, it's a support that he is requesting. Similarly, the telecommunications operator license, that's also a support requested. Not that we're definitely doing it. It's going to be discussed during the budget process, but he's voicing his opinion on behalf of the police department now.
The dispatcher that y'all want, did you say that will or will not preclude the necessity of the outside contracting?
It would not.
Not.
We could not get them away because it would have to be 24 hours. And since we don't have officers full 24 hours currently, we need the assistance of their services to assist us. So we would, dispatcher will work when the majority of our officers are on campus.
Okay. And then just one point of clarification. The sheet says, continue to provide 2 officers at every high school, 1 at each middle school, and 1 at each elementary school. Are we actually at that?
Not,
The updated sheet says recruit to fill all positions to continue to provide that. We're currently not there. If you look a little bit lower, it says we have 35 police officers out of 42. So we're not there yet, but we are working on recruitment, and that's what Lieutenant Resendez was explaining, that based on what you approved, I believe you approved up to 7 positions, so that we can work with people to take the academy, and then based on them staying with us, we could reimburse the academy. So we are working on recruitment. We're not there yet, but that's our goal.
Okay, we're moving toward it.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Diligently, we're trying.
All right. Anyone else?
Any other questions?
Thank you so much, Lieutenant.
Thank you for your time.
HR and Employee Services. Dr. Tagana.
And here they are. 5 and 5.
We'll speak quickly because Mr. Macias has 10 questions. Ms. Garza.
Okay, good evening. So our key strategies align with our Judson ISD scorecard. I'm going to highlight some new initiatives that align with our goals, of course, for recruiting and retaining quality employees, target hard-to-fill positions, and build leadership capacity within our existing employees. First, we're excited to partner with the Jeff Foundation as they have provided some funding for recruitment and retention initiatives such as our first one, SPED certification reimbursement for current JISD teachers, $10,000 in scholarships for 10 paraprofessionals to support them in continuing their education to become teachers. And also based on previous feedback, we are enhancing our recognition of employees, and this year will be the first year we've added paraprofessional staff to our annual recognitions, and they are going to be receiving a monetary award. Results to date. So we are also improving our exit processes within HR. We're moving to an online exit process with built-in survey questions, an option to request an in-person exit interview, and conducting state interviews to collect data that guides ideas for retention. And we have already implemented some of these and have collected information. We'd be happy to share that with you through Friday Notes. We have also started collaborating with Curriculum Department and Region 20 to support our DOI teachers. And we're excited to report that based on the TAPER report for 23-24 school year, our district turnover rate has decreased and was reported as lower than both the region and the state.
So we're not going to turn over 500 teachers. Just making sure.
As earlier reported.
Speaking now about leadership development, we know the importance of feedback, and we have been listening to our employees here in Judson ISD to discuss career advancement opportunities. So I'm just here to highlight a couple of new ones that we have. The first one is with Grand Canyon University, and that is where our current employees can work on a 4-year degree, all online, and work towards a 4-year degree. Our second one that we have a new partnership with is with Region 20 through their TOP program, which is an alternative certification program where people within our district who have a 4-year degree can work on getting a teaching certification. And lastly, a new one that we're very excited about that's in the works is a partnership with UTSA for continuing education for people who would like to pursue a master's degree.
Nice, yay, good.
And each year, our purpose as an Employee Services Department is to develop a benefit package which meets the needs both of the employees and the district. To determine those benefit needs, each year we receive feedback through our insurance committee, but we realize it's a small sample, and we wanted to expand our engagement opportunity across the district in alignment with the scorecard. So what we did was conduct a district-wide benefit survey, which is now in progress. So we try to focus also on our employee satisfaction by listening carefully to their concerns and try to develop solutions. Earlier in the year, we heard Lucent Health wasn't answering phone calls, and Lucent Health came back and added a link for our employees to schedule callbacks. But now, as of January 1st, they also have a dedicated phone line for our employees to call. And hopefully this will improve our customer service and the response time. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Dagenot for
There we go.
support.
And for supports, our departments are committed to do our part in reducing expenses in our overall budget. And so we would just ask for support that as we are doing that and looking for other fund sources for some of our initiatives, like recognizing our employees, we will be reducing our overall department budget as well. And so we would ask for support in a reclassification for one of our hourly employee positions in the Employee Services Department. This particular position works with our workers' compensation claims. In the last 5 years, those claims have increased tremendously. Last year, the dollar amount doubled from $500,000 to $1 million, and currently this year, we're at about $700K. So that workload has increased in the years, and this particular person that is in this position is working a lot of overtime. And so we're looking to reclassify that position to be an exempt position so that we can look at the work that she's doing and her the workload that she has and make it commensurate with her compensation. In addition to that, just any type of recommendations regarding our stipends, that's going to be based on the results of our TASB survey that we are working on in conjunction with our business office. They'll be conducting that survey this spring, I believe in February. So we'll have some results for that.
Questions? All 10 of your questions, Mr. Massey?
Not all
Go ahead.
10, but yeah, just a couple of things to follow up on that we discussed in the past. One would be the substitutes, putting our substitute teachers on a track as DOI teachers or even certified teachers. Has that been looked at as a pool of potential candidates to serve in these roles?
Actually, we have had some discussions, Dr. Barrera and I, about creating that pipeline for our substitutes. So that is something that we are working on.
Okay, that would be good. And then, of course, the thing that comes up most with teachers is the relevance of PD. So how are we ensuring that we're providing relevant PD for our teachers or our staff that doesn't feel like they're going through the motions? So is there some work in trying to determine what that needs to look like to give some more autonomy to our teachers?
Definitely, we work with, our curriculum and teaching and learning department. We get feedback, we share feedback with them anytime we do, and they plan those on-time professional developments as well.
So there's still the process of then trying to determine.
Right, we get feedback from every PD that we do offer in the district, and so for this year, we've heard it. They want to kind of have like a college feel, so we're trying to put together Judson ISD University this summer for our August PD for our teachers. And so we're looking at, you take your core courses and you can choose some electives to kind of shake up some things, and so we're in the process of planning that. Right now, we're really excited about it and making sure that our teachers, we've asked what type of PD they would like to see, what kind of extracurriculars they would like to see for PD to go in some areas of their passion and whatnot. So we're really excited about what we're going to launch this summer. But constantly looking for ways to meet the needs of our teachers.
Thank you. The only two other points, the rubric. Have we met with every employee that's been impacted by the rubric, or that's still ongoing? Where would you say we are right now?
We have released and distributed all of our salary rubrics. I think we have maybe one or two employees that we're following up with.
Okay, so it's going very well.
Yes, sir.
All right, and then the last one is more of a customer service thing that Ms. Stanford and I have talked about in the past. Employees saying they've called and they're not going to call back, which I know a lot of you guys call back because I hear about that. But in terms of, I made a recommendation some months ago about retaining a company just to take calls. That way it starts to document what kind of calls we're receiving, what the nature of the calls are before they get to you. Just another way to manage where we need to put resources. And so I still would hope that at one point you could come forward with a recommendation on having an affordable process of, I'm not saying spending thousands and thousands of dollars, but some way for us to ensure employees are being heard and responded to. And again, I've not heard a lot of negative as of late. There's been a lot of, especially you, Dr. Benetta, you've been on it. But bottom line is making sure that there is not an employee that feels they're not being responded to when they get a call and it's taking a while. So any feedback on that, Dr. Taganov?
The team is working really, really hard to improve customer service every day, and I think that the team has done a tremendous job in doing so. We can certainly look into a call-type service. I would really need to look into that a little bit more. We do have some staff that we may be able to utilize just for calls. But we do have a dedicated email address that we respond to very, very quickly. And so if it is phone calls, it may not necessarily be phone calls that the Human Resources Department has to answer. We may have to disperse that out to other departments. And so I don't know that I would attribute all of the negativity or the lack of response to the department, because it's not always calls that have to do with human resources, so to speak. So we can definitely look at a call service and see what that looks like and the feasibility of cost as we're trying to reduce
expenses. And really, in my mind, it's for you to manage your resources better. Say, for example, there's 1 million calls that come to the substitute person, whoever that is. We're not really tracking that, but guess what? That takes away from their daily work if they're getting a bunch of calls. And so that's an example of just managing where the sources, and if it's misdirected, now you find out, hey, we're getting a lot of employees sending us stuff that has nothing to do with us. It might be another department. But that's just my recommendation, to really then hone in on building a quality plan for addressing future issues. That's all I have. Thank you.
Anyone else? No? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is athletic.
Good evening. I think you know my incredible colleagues.
Yes, we do.
Tiffany Lopez. First, thank you for your support in all of our athletic events, and I know you can't make a lot of them sometimes, but you share our posts and you give our coaches good words of encouragement, our athletes, so thank you. So 3 target populations that we focus on, obviously students, staff, and the community. And a few things, we do a lot, obviously, beyond budget and scheduling. But a few things we do that I want to highlight for the students is, new this year, we do offer free physicals for all of our student athletes. But for some reason, our middle school students fail to show up, and then they are not able to participate in strength and conditioning, or they're not on time for tryouts with their credentials needed. So what we're doing this year, with her tremendous help, is we've gotten free physicals for all of our incoming 7th and 8th grade student athletes, but they're going to be given at their campus during the school day.
Nice. Oh, wow.
So that's a big deal that Coach Lopez worked really hard with, our middle school athletic trainer. So we're excited about that. Also with students, we put in a new initiative, our attendance improvement movement, our AIM program. Learned a lot about attendance and trying to figure out how to get them to school, working on that. But as of right now, our numbers are student athletes with 8 absences or less. We're sitting at 1953 out of 3141, which is about 62% of our athletes that are doing a great job right now. And we do offer incentives for them every single 9 weeks. Moving on to our staff, we offer budget workshops every second year. And of course, we continue with our measures of success to look for accountability beyond wins and losses. Moving on to our stakeholders in our community, as we do a community member spotlight. Every sport has to honor one community member every season. And then obviously, we are continuing with our Operation Dog Tags game, which has been quite a hit. Other than that, we sit ready to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Will immunizations be a part of this physical?
No, ma'am.
So they still have to go to their doctor?
Absolutely.
Or the clinics that we offer.
The wraparound?
We have mobile
I need you to
vaccination
get the
clinics.
microphone, Ms. Dr. Johnson. We have
Yeah.
clinics that come in throughout the summer, and then we focus on those grades that are requiring immunizations as we go forward, and we encourage the parents to bring them in
Right,
to
we
the
have-
mobile clinics.
We have mobile clinics scheduled all year. In fact, we have 3 coming up.
Anyone else?
Quick
Yes.
comment. Oh, go ahead.
Mr. Macias?
Oh, who has a quick comment? You want to go first, Ms. Stafford?
Okay. I just want to acknowledge that you consistently go under budget, so just kudos for that, because that's worth noting. And just wanted to clarify, you've got requested support for 25-26. Those are all things that you are saying we need to consider?
Absolutely. We're constantly doing evaluations of facilities and and equipment and things like that. So these are, with Wagner, they're just the only high school that does not have tennis courts right now. So we're working on that. I'm looking at some different options that are.
The lights.
Lights, sorry.
The
They have
courts, not
tennis
the lights.
courts. They don't have lights. And I'm looking at some different options that will not be as expensive, such as solar. But what I want to do is I'm going to go to those facilities that currently have them and see how well it's lit
Yeah.
before we just invest that money into that.
So the pool where's the pool located?
Right next to Coronado.
Coronado.
Yes, ma'am.
So,
It's constantly has issues. We just need to get a partnership together or put it on a bond and try to come up with some way to get a new pool. I did put some numbers there. Alamo Heights built theirs for 17 million. Southwest built theirs for 27 million. Just to give you an idea of, not many people know how much it costs. It's pretty expensive, and it's expensive to upkeep as well.
yeah. Well, I know the swim coach has been wanting this for a while.
Yeah, I think a lot
All
of
the
people
swimmers do.
All
And the swimmers do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Macias?
I was, you've been here long enough and you see a lot of things. So right now, this team you have is probably the strongest athletic team that we've had ever. So, which means a lot of really positive things can happen. So earlier, when you mentioned about giving physicals to middle school students during the day, that's innovative, and that's going to ensure that we're getting our reach. But in that same vein, I understand that extracurriculars are important for student development. And at this point, middle school is one of the areas in which we're really trying to motivate and support student development. Are there some thoughts, and if not, consider them going forward, in trying to get every student involved in some form of extracurricular that can come from the athletic area that's encouraging? And it may be as generic as a promotion day, which I'm sure you guys may do, but I'm just trying to ensure that we touch every middle schooler and we engage them in something. If it's LOTC, if it's the arts like band, but athletics, there's room for it. I've been told, coaches have said, we need some more people. So finding ways to motivate a fifth grader coming into sixth grade to join in athletics. So my comment is twofold. The other is accessibility for students. Do you see, have you seen what those barriers might look like? Because I'm concerned that poverty may be a main reason why we don't have access to all of our students involved in extracurricular. And so naturally, grants and other things will need to be written to support that. So just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, great question. And we're already, I feel like, very much ahead of the game. We have partnered and got grants, received grants from the Spurs. And so we have a WNBA and an NBA league that we put on every Monday night. We just finished with the league for free for all of our sixth graders. We do I Play Sports, which is 3rd through 5th grade, all year long. And that's free for every single elementary that is willing to participate. We have NFL Flag that we do for free after school 2 times a year during the season. And then our summer strength and conditioning is free and open to any JISD student. So there's plenty of opportunity. And like you said, last night or the last 3 nights, we've been speaking at all of our 8th grade orientations and trying to promote every single sport that we can. There is a place for every student athlete.
Can you
Or
speak
every
to the
student.
pre-athletics classes?
Yes, we have pre-athletics that helps all of our 6th graders prepare for 7th and 8th grade athletics. So they will not just play the sport, but they'll learn how to participate. And it also, when we run these 6th grade leagues, it teaches the parents how to be a good spectator as well. So there's a lot involved with it. And then they learn when they play on those Monday nights what it actually feels like to wake up the next day and have to come to school. So they're getting the whole experience of that. Even during the class period, they teach the young men how to put on their football pads, how to run down the hall and get to class. So they're learning all these lessons, and they keep track of their grades, just like they would if they were a UIL participant.
Well, that's all promising, and that's obviously the foundational pieces that you guys have been doing, that now we can start developing a roadmap to increasing outcomes based on all of these wonderful initiatives. I tend to think about a young lady who was in 7th, 8th grade who wanted to be a cheerleader and really couldn't because she couldn't afford to get all of the stuff to be a cheerleader. And so she wasn't involved. And that's sort of when I think about poverty. I'm thinking those that, we don't want them to call them out, but we want to create opportunities for more engagement. Our district is closer to 75% economically disadvantaged. We know it exists here. So now this is our time with your excellent, awesome team to figure out how can we encourage, cultivate more participation from our middle school. Because if we get them there, they more than likely will continue in high school. And in the same vein, on the art side. So if Mr. Witt was here, I would be asking him the same thing. What are you doing to get people in orchestra or band, or how are you making this accessible?
Absolutely, it's a grassroots effort. It has to be, and the numbers have been proven with kids that are involved. They're more likely to succeed. Yeah, absolutely.
Ms. Stanford?
Yeah, just a quick follow-up on that. So for students that maybe can't afford the uniforms, is there assistance in some way?
Oh, yes, ma'am. They put them on payment plans. They work to get funds through their booster club. Cheer booster clubs are very strong. We find a way for them. There's very rarely, I would say, almost zero that kids get turned away.
Okay, good to hear.
And if not, I'll just ask Dr. Fields.
Thank you all
Thank
so
you,
much for
guys.
everything you do. I see you
Appreciate
around
you.
everywhere. I appreciate that.
Next is
It is.
Ms. Garcia and her team with Student and Family Support Services, Dr. Goff.
Okay, good evening. Today I'm going to be presenting our Student and Family Support Services program review. And this evening I'd like to share information about 3 key strategies. The first key strategy is district attendance and dropout prevention, which is Board Goal 1.3. As you heard in the previous conversation, our ADA rate is on target, and we are meeting our goal of 94% that we have for this school year. For 2025-2026 school year, we are looking to stay on that uphill trajectory of moving from 94% to 96% as a goal for next school year. Our truancy department feels confident that we could reach our goal with the use of Rawi K-12 and our increased communication with parents and our strategies that we've put in place for truancy prevention. Our second key strategy is student and staff mental health and SEL, Board Goal 1.2 and 2.2. We are excited to announce that the Wraparound Service Center counting contracts are producing positive results. From August to November, we have seen 179 students, and we have had 397 sessions. Our third key strategy is college, career, military readiness, Board Goal 1.3. We're working to reach our goal of 100% completion of our 4-year plans within schoolings. We've had 47% of students log in up to date with a total amount of 15,980 logins. And currently we have 42% of our students that have completed career interest inventories from August to January with a total number of 3,009 career interest inventories. So if you're seeing some of the data on the screen, I did provide as much updated information for up to date. Our request for support for 25 to 26 school year and reviewing our SELF plan, we have determined that Judson ISD would benefit from a district mentoring, school-wide mentoring program. We're in the planning stages, and we estimate about $15,000 will be needed to implement the program. Second, under truancy and attendance, we started looking for our sustainability plan to manage the ACOG grant. With our first key initiative is to sustain Rawi K-12, as it has assisted us in increasing our communication and efficiency to increase our ADA. And that concludes our presentation, unless you have any questions for me.
Questions?
Yes, you're the last one, right? This is
the last?
this is it.
Yes.
I got to treat you like everyone else. I have comments and questions. But basically, you're saying a mentoring program that would be district-wide?
Yes.
Okay, I appreciate that. Obviously, that's good. And would it be for elementary and middle school or high school, or what would be the focus?
Elementary, middle school, and high school, but with the focus of high school and middle school first. So we'll see how many other support we can get from other grants and mentoring programs, but we are looking at paying to start some services for high school and middle school.
Okay, and I guess that would contribute to the social emotional well-being for students, right?
Yes.
Are you looking at other nonprofit organizations? I'm reading the list, but other nonprofit organizations to collaborate with as well?
Yes. And we're going to work with communities and schools as well. And we do have some other nonprofits that have been reaching out to us. And we know that it has been an initiative we wanted to start, but we have so many initiatives in our department, so we have to take them slow. And this is the point where we need to start moving, because we know that research is out there that having mentoring programs will actually, our students will benefit from it. So we're ready to, and we are going to ask cabinet and ERC staff members locally bringing in mentors in from the district to go out and work on the schools with our students too. So starting getting all the process together and the paperwork.
Well, I'm excited about that, and it's one step at a time, and your office is critical to really meeting the needs of students beyond the classroom, which is extremely important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Faulkner?
So in number 2, sustainability plan for ACOG grant, does that mean the grant's going away?
No, the grant, we still are, and this is our 3rd year that we're applying. It's not going away, but the way that the grant works is that it reduces the amount of money that we use. So this is going into our 3rd year, so we have to start showing if there's something that's working, can we sustain it or not? But we are going to go in and ask for the full amount as well too. But we were just thinking about half for Rawi, 50% to start looking to see if we can sustain that locally.
Okay.
I'd also say, Ms. Faulkner, that Ms. Garcia has done an excellent job on getting grants to support the initiatives in her area. So much so that she's even brought on positions. And now we find ourselves in a situation where our attendance has shot up tremendously. And we can't move away from this model because it's working. We have higher attendance now than we had pre-COVID. So when you have positions that she's brought on through the grants to the tune of about 340,000, that's one of the things that we have to look at when we come back to the board, because we can't lose that. We're making traction, and it counts for so much more than just ADA. This is students at school getting educated, what we are supposed to be doing. So she's just letting us know that right now we have the grant, it works, but if the grant goes away, then some of these things are just too valuable to leave on the side.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Oh, thank you. Thank you all for your support throughout the school year. I appreciate it.
Any other questions? No?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, so that is the end of item 4, and item 5 is adjournment. So with no further business, we are adjourned at 7:55 PM. Thank you all.